Hi, welcome to another Friday, episode number 104 of Heavy Metallurgy with my awesome co-host, Alan. Congratulations on surviving another week. The semester is ending soon. Hopefully you're doing well.
I'm doing all right. We're getting close to the end of another semester. So, how did the movie Mean Girls end? The principal stands up and says, "I'd like to tell you that you're all winners, and I couldn't be happier this school year is ending."
Right on. Busy week here at Heavy Metallurgy. We've had a lot of stuff going on. We had a review Monday from Alan Smolder. We had a Megaton album spotlight with S. Craig Zoller and Kellen. We had a discussion about Rotten Sound with the album club, and here we are. Plus, I've got reviews to put up hopefully this weekend and one Monday. So lots of stuff going on. Thank you everybody for hanging out with us, and a couple new people in the chat. Hello, Tony Clem. Good to see you, man. Thanks for joining us. Anybody else that's new and I missed? Hello.
Mick Irish was there a few minutes ago, so don't recognize that name.
There we go. Mick Irish, yep. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before we get into the nitty gritty today, I just wanted to say that we launched a couple more new releases up for pre-order today on Byron Recordings. The new Panopticon, it's not new, it was released digitally some time ago, but it's finally getting a vinyl treatment, limited to 400 copies. It's Scars 2 The Basics, and also a Pure Country album, Americana album, even though the gentleman is Canadian. It sounds very much in that realm. Oh my God, I just drew a blank. I see it in my head. Richard Inman. Oh my God. It's the early albums. It's the first two albums released in one collector's package. Super limited. Only 300 of those are being done. So, head on over to Byron Recordings. Check that out if a little bit more of a country vibe is your thing. We got some other stuff coming. New Glorious Dead record, which you hear every intro on this channel. That's a clip off the new Glorious Dead record. And, a band called Eve, their second album. That'll be coming soon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, pre-orders for that'll be coming up sooner than later. But other than that, Slayer, we have a guest tonight. Someone we've been wanting to get back on. You've been seeing her on some reviews here and there for us. Let's give it up for Melanie from Melanie Loves Death Metal. Woo, Melanie! Her fourth Friday with us. And it's good to see you. It's been a while. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. I feel good. I feel like I don't know. I'm ready to go. Slayer. I'm excited. I love this band.
Well, Melanie picked the topic tonight, so
she was so excited. She actually posted sort of a Slayer preview video on her own channel,
right? Which I started to watch. I'm like, why am I watching this? I'm going to hear it all and see it all again in a matter of hours.
I tried not to say too much about each album and just show it off today. I was excited that I finally got all the studio albums, even though it was an album that I don't really care too much for, but it's like, well, I'll show them off. But I got to do the vinyl next. I definitely have a lot of cool vinyl that I can show off.
Nice. Well, before we get into the topic at hand, what has been going on over at Melanie Loves Death Metal? And you have launched a new channel since last time we have chatted.
Yeah. Not a whole lot with Melanie Loves Death Metal. Work has been really tough. I haven't been able to record as many videos. My new channel is just other music genres. I think I have like 2 videos that I've pre-recorded. I just have to upload them because I don't just listen to metal. I listen to a lot of jazz and like classic rock, and that's what's been going on over there. And I feel like it's been really strange lately. I've been going back and forth between listening to like Slayer, obviously, and then Mystifier, and then like towards the end of the day, I'll switch over to like Phil Collins or Genesis. I've been kind of all over the place with my music, but yeah, I should be able to start recording some more content next week and the following weeks. Just it's been kind of crazy. End of the school year, Alan, as you know, my sons have been busy with recitals and school things and stuff. Yeah. So they end in a couple of weeks, and then I should have my nights after work and stuff free again. So looking forward to that.
Actually, this is a good thing to post here. Aaron says Melanie Loves Death Metal plays. That you've hinted at this, and you've never really gone into too much detail. Guitar, bass, what is a guitar you're playing?
Yeah, maybe someday. Definitely guitar. I don't know, maybe someday. I definitely have been thinking about doing some stuff like that, but I don't want to turn into like a guitar covers channel because I'm not too good. Like it takes me a while to learn something and then record it. I don't have good recording gear either.
I tell you what, the guitar gear people on YouTube are the ones that are blowing up. They're the ones that
Yeah, I
their
know.
shit is they're giving tons of gear and they have big,
Yeah, I follow a lot of them, especially the luthier
yeah,
channels that where they make their own guitars. Like those are super fun to watch. But
yep,
like Ola England is like one of my favorite YouTubers. He was just at Nam
yeah.
or
He's
Nam,
fun. He's fun.
and I love his videos. There's a couple of other smaller guys that I follow. I think that's pretty much what I only used to do on YouTube was watch those kinds of videos, and then I moved on to like the collecting vinyl and tapes and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe someday I'll get there. I'm kind of weird about playing in front of people.
Remember, it's not. Wait, how does it go? It's not how. It's how bad you suck. It's how loud you suck it. I don't know. I can't remember. It refers to playing guitar. Hopefully, it's how people take it. Anyway,
that didn't sound very encouraging, Marty.
probably just got demonetized too, by the way. So great, congratulations.
But in terms of Aaron Metal Theologian's channel, I love his videos because he doesn't stick with just one genre, and he pulls out things I've never even thought about listening to or would never think to look at a record store. So that channel's bad for me sometimes because I find myself then going to Discogs and be like, ooh, let's see, how much is that?
Okay. Before we get into the Slayer thing, I just wanted to one little brief snippet. And Slayer is an American thrash metal band for those who didn't know.
No. They're a traditional metal band from San Antonio. They were real big in the 80s for a while before one of the guys joined Riot and they had to change their name. Oh, wait. Wrong Slayer. Never mind. Crap. Give me a minute. I got to reboot here.
They're considered part of the Big Four, and they formed in Huntington Park, California in 1981 by Jeff Hanneman, Kerry King, Dave Lombardo, Tom Araya. Araya. I always said Araya. But yeah. And I guess the best thing to do would be to start off Slayer. What where were you doing, and how did this band sit in your younger years?
So my brother is the reason why I know who Slayer is. He actually had Rain in Blood, obviously, was on his CD rack, but this particular album was the one that I remember seeing and hearing all the time. And that album cover was like, what is that? And I started, stealing his CDs and listening to them. And that's kind of how I got into them. And then that's just the fact that they were considered the Big Four with Anthrax and Metallica and that other band that I don't care about. So that's pretty much, I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And then when I was able to get my own money and be able to buy my own CDs without having my parents do it for me, I got the first Slayer CD I ever bought was South of Heaven. And I don't know how I was able to get it because I definitely was not old enough to, because it had the parental advisory. Pretty sure it had the parental. Yeah, it did. Parental advisory, but the guy sold it to me. So I was probably like 13 or 14 years old.
Oh, that's weird. This is the original tape from back in the day, and it doesn't have the.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's the tape I bought when it came out, and doesn't have parental advisory.
I don't own any Slayer on tape, which is interesting. And now that I've realized that, I'm like, well, now I kind of want them on tape for just no reason at all, other than that it'd be fun to just collect them. I probably would never play them ever. I've actually played my CDs more than I do my vinyl records, and I have pretty much their whole entire discography on vinyl too.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, I think that Slayer is probably the first band that I ever really fell in love with, but didn't tell people I fell in love with because of the shock value and all the trouble that they were getting in with the media. And I didn't want people to think that I was some crazy Satanist murderer. So I kind of suppressed loving them so much. And then as I got older, obviously I don't care anymore at all. And it's actually not anything crazy compared to what is out there now. But yeah, it was one of those bands I just never really admitted to loving until I got older and met friends that listened to them, and then seeing them in concert was like one of those things that was like, I have to see them in concert. I have to. And it was so fun. So I definitely got to see them. I've seen them a lot. I've seen them with Lombardo and without Lombardo, and then Gary Holt and all of that. So I can't even remember how many times. This is probably the band I've seen the most live. So
never seen them.
They're so fun. Even like the Repentless tour, like the last tour that they did, it wasn't just, it wasn't like the traditional old Slayer, obviously, but with, Tom Araya's sounding a little bit older and Kerry King's not moving around as much, it was still a really great show.
Right. Well, Alan, how about you? Same question.
Kind of similar. First time I heard Slayer tracks would have been on a couple of compilation albums, just the cheap, $5 kind of, metal, blitz, metal storm, metal thrash or whatever, the kind of thing you'd find, at a gas station, next to the cigarettes and all that. Pretty sure the first song I heard by them on one of those was Chemical Warfare. So that's a good place to start. Slayer, I mean, everybody in high school knew about Slayer, of course, by reputation. They weren't a band that was extremely popular among my circle of friends, and I'm not really sure why that is. Part of it may have just been, again, we were out in the country and kids were still kind of easily spooked by the overtly satanic stuff back then. I don't know if some kids were just kind of avoiding them because maybe this band's a little too much. It may also have been that, certainly by, senior year, people were already starting to get more into, death metal stuff. And so they might have kind of zipped on past Slayer a little bit. People knew about them. It's not like people thought they were lame or anything. It was not one of the bands that we ever talked about a lot or that got played up very much at that time. So really, I didn't get my first Slayer album. The first time I sat down and heard a full album start to finish when I was in college already. And that was South of Heaven. It was the first one I heard because it was the album they had in the campus library listening room.
Wow.
They had a weird music collection. So I learned pretty early on, just take my homework over there. You could dig out, records, they literally, you sit down like a little, cubicle with where they had headphones, jacked in, but you'd have to go up, and tell them I want to hear this record. And when it would end, you'd have to go up and be like, can you please turn over the record at, cubicle number 3. And but they had they had a weird and good heavy metal selection. I mean, I'd sit there doing college level Spanish homework, listening to Witchfinder General and Slayer LPs. So yeah, that was, the first album that I had heard by the band. And obviously, then finally, being at, college, started having the opportunity, finding some of their albums and started picking them up pretty rapidly. And so, yeah, it just kind of, slowly grew from there. So yeah, kind of a weird start. They were a band. It took a little while before I got to pick up a lot of their stuff. I'd already been listening to, a lot of other thrash bands for several years at that point before I was able to get, a Slayer album of my own. So what about you, Marty? What is your Slayer tale?
I think it was Best of Metal Blade Volume 1. Chemical Warfare, I believe, was on that one. And that song blew me away. Friend of mine, Scott, ended up getting Show No Mercy, so I got a dub of that right away. And I'm with everybody. I love the satanic element of that band. They did feel scary, the Satanic Panic thing. I was wrapped up in how cool that was, and thankfully my parents never really discouraged what I listened to. They would hear all sorts of crap coming from my bedroom, and they're just like, ugh, I wish you'd go back to listening to Kiss again. We hated that too, but that was at least more palatable than this shit. But Slayer, and it's funny digging in this week and listening to the entire catalog, because there's some albums that I have not heard in this. I have not heard an album by this band in full since Divine Intervention was the last Slayer record I bought. So I do listen to Slayer, and it's usually Show No Mercy or it's Rain and Blood. Those are the two I listen to. It's usually Rain and Blood. That album to me, though we're ranking them tonight too, so I'm not gonna spoil my ranking, but it's not number one, but it's damn close, and that album just still to this day just kicks my ass. The songs are so good. I can hit play and sing along with every single word, and it's so much fun to do dishes or cook or clean. Listen to that record. I love it. And it's amazing to me how unique Slayer was. Nobody sounds like Slayer. There's a lot of bands that may have tinkered with that style of thrash, but it was the tone of the guitars, the style of the riffs, the solos, and the two biggest to me are Dave Lombardo's drum work, that free-flowing jazz attack of listening to some drum fills like on South of Heaven. It's like, oh my God, how does anybody play this? And Tom Araya's vocals to this day, I mean, he is an original vocalist, and very charismatic frontman back in the day too. All of his weird satanic rambling in between tracks, and it's just hilarious. I mean, just this Southern California, it seems like every time you see him, he's like smiling and chuckling, and here he is up on stage, talking about satanic shit, and all tongue in cheek, of course. But this band, I mean, even up to their very last album, they still sounded like Slayer. And that to me is awesome. And a lot of ways, Slayer might be one of the instances where sticking to your identity too closely might be a problem. I don't know. We'll maybe get into that a little bit. I mean, I still appreciate the fact they sound like Slayer, but here's a question. Here's a question for everybody. So obviously, I listened to some Slayer records this week that I'd never heard before. And some of them I didn't like, some of them I did like. And I appreciate the fact it still sound like Slayer, but the fact that I didn't have my DNA imprint on it, like those early albums I've spun so much, they become, like I said, I could not have put on Show No Mercy for 15 years and put it on and still be able to sing along to the whole thing. It's just such a part of my coming up in this music, shaping my musical taste. And what part, oh my God, I was kind of losing my train of thought here, but where listening to I just going to say listening to the new stuff, and it still sounds like Slayer, not having that connection to it. Did the band lose us, or did the band lose their way, in their sound and their style, their songwriting, ferocity or skill? I mean, because at some point I jumped off, and listening to the new stuff now, I appreciate it, but I don't know if I care as much as I did about the earlier stuff. What do you guys think?
It's a good question. Do we want to dive into it now, or kind of talk about it as we go through the discography? I'm just
How do you guys want to do it? It don't matter to me.
I think it's similar to, like, for me, for like Fear Factory. Dino will not just let Fear Factory go, and he's continuing it with the new lead singer, reissuing albums, which I'm happy about because there's a couple of them I've always wanted on vinyl. But like, I think it got to that point where they just were this iconic thrash metal band in the scene, and they knew that they were going to make money. It was a way of living. And I think a lot of it was really just Kerry King not wanting to let go either. Because like he even claimed, like, after they made Repentless and then they stopped, like, I'm not done. I'm going to continue to make music and do things. He hasn't done anything yet, though. So maybe he finally is enjoying retirement. I don't know. But I think that that's essentially what it ended up being, more so. I think they were making records just to do it. Whereas when they first started, like, you could tell that they were having fun and that this was, something that they truly loved and enjoyed. You can almost hear it, too, in some of the albums towards the end of their career, where they're just not as energetic, at least from Tom Araya's perspective. I think Kerry King, to a point, I think he just wanted to explore other ways of playing music and other metal genres, and he couldn't tear away from the Slayer identity. And I think that he probably could have and would have been fine with it. But he just chose to stay with Slayer the whole time. So I don't know. I think that they lost themselves, to be honest. I think it eventually just became a job to them and not necessarily something that they like really truly love doing, like they did maybe in the beginning. Although their the end tour, whatever they were calling it, lasted for like what 2 years. They really milked that one.
Well, look at Kiss's farewell tour. It's
Yeah.
been going on for 2 different occurrences of that tour has happened in the
But yeah, I don't know if it like for me personally, they didn't fully lose me as a fan, but I know that they did for a lot of people. But and a lot of people heavily rely on their older albums, like the ones that they're most known for. So I think that's similar. It's they're similar to Metallica in that way a little bit. I mean, although Metallica fans are just insane in general. If they're like Metallica fans, they're all in. Slayer fans can be pretty much like hit or miss. Like, I'm fine with just the first 3 albums, and the rest are nothing to me. And then they're okay with that, and they don't like shame you for liking the other stuff. So I don't know. It's just interesting question.
Well, there's that old thing that they say, if you do turn something you love into a job, it's dangerous because you can end up hating the thing you love, type of thing. What do you think about this, Alan?
Well, before I jump into it, just want to say thanks to Ian for doing the super chat.
Thanks, Ian.
I don't know about the Forbidden Reunion. Cautiously optimistic, which is my general response when these bands kind of try to get back together. You hope they'll do well, but you're never sure if they can really recapture the magic. So I'm not sure. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
And actually, speaking of that, Jeff over at Gas Masks and Hand Grenades tonight had a hour-long discussion with Craig LaCicero from Forbidden about the reunion. And Craig's been making the rounds on other channels as well, talking about it. So I liked Omega Wave. I thought that was a good comeback record. And I'm highly confident that what comes out, I mean, granted, it won't be Russ singing anymore, but I've seen some stuff of the new guy singing online, and he sounds good. So if they stay in that aggressive thrash style, I'm down, as long as the songs are good. But thank you again, Ian. Appreciate it. $5 helps out the cause for sure.
Absolutely. But yeah, so let's see. The question, if I think a few things happened with Slayer. One thing, they obviously got a little older and kind of, to some extent, grew out of the, satanic blasphemy stuff to a degree. They never completely left it, but they definitely moved away from that. So at some point, you lose the, black magic, die by a sword, hell stuff. And it kind of get, replaced with more, angry at the government, angry at the economy. We're angry at things. And, so there was a shift in the lyrical stuff that was less interesting. Like almost every big name 80s metal band that, tried to chug through the 90s, they hit a rough patch that we'll be talking about here in a little while. And they lost a lot of their fan base with some of those albums. I remember those albums coming out and tons of people being, not just let down or disappointed, but, actively pissed off at how different some of those albums sounded. Slayer was one of those bands that had remained very consistent sound-wise and quality-wise longer than most of the other 80s thrash bands did. But when they also kind of, then caved into some of, the, 90s, sounds and norms, that really got under people's skins, because this was a band that a lot of people really took to heart. This was their band. Mm-hmm. And for them to kind of finally, quote unquote, sell out was taken very poorly. Around that same time, they're kind of, late 90s, early 2000s. They also developed a reputation for being very inconsistent live. They were still touring. People would still go see them, but you got very mixed reviews on their live shows for years around that time. You could go watch them one night and they would be on fire and kill it. You could go watch them the next night and they would just kind of stand up there and yawn their way through the set and just like, yeah, sure, here's Angel of Death, what the fuck ever. You paid for your ticket. It's too late now. And so that rankled a lot of folks too, that they did not consistently, give it their best effort in the live environment during some of those leaner years where they had already alienated a chunk of their fan base as it was. By the time they kind of, got things, back on the road in terms of their sound and style. Again, at that point, they're 25 years into their career. We've talked about this, same kind of concept with other bands and other topics. It can be hard, for these, middle-aged, reasonably successful, musicians to really still capture the same fire, especially, when it's supposed to be, sort of, this angry, aggressive stance, is their central thing. When you're, 20 and you're pissed off at the world and you haven't made it and you're trying to prove yourself to everybody, you're going to have a much more visceral attack than when you're 48 and you've toured the world 8 times and, you got nothing left to prove to anybody. So it's...
Jesus, Frosty.
Frosty, thank you very much, man.
Thank you very much.
Very generous.
Wow.
You're too kind.
Appreciate it. So, even though, some of those, albums, like you said, Marty, they, had their sound, up till close to the end. But at that point, they'd been doing it for a long time. And like you said, they stuck to their formula very closely. So as we'll discuss, some of those later albums, it's not that they're bad, but they're just, it's what you've been doing for so long. And it's just the same thing all over, but not quite as good as it was before. So what's my motivation to keep playing it over and over? But, like a lot of those 80s bands that did survive the 90s, they did find their footing. And of course, have been, kind of re-embraced as this iconic thing that lasted as long as it could. So, and good for them that they made it through. But yeah, there were definitely some extenuating factors there that hurt the band for a period of time in the middle of their career. That's my take on it. What's yours?
I think it's tough for a band. I mean, here's a bunch of kids that get together and start playing this super aggressive underground music. There is no way in hell, like Entombed's Left Hand Path. Let's just put that out there. Like 16, 17-year-old dudes writing this music. There is no way in hell they think that 30 years later, they're still going to be doing that. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. And here, Slayer, we just talked about this recently with Metallica. Here's a band that starts off young and angry. They put out records. They do a lot. They take a lot of good steps, and they actually build a career out of it. I remember the first when Jeff Hanneman died in 2013. That's when people are like, Slayer should quit. Slayer should quit. Why should Slayer quit? I mean, they've been doing this since they were teenagers. What are they going to do? Quit? Start a new band? Why would they do that? They've spent their entire lives building this brand, this musical imprint, known the world over for what they've done and what they're doing with a very distinctive sound. Thank you again, Ian. That's very, very kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks, folks. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, folks are awesome. Thank you so much. What are they supposed to do? Just say, well, Slayer's done. We're going to go get a job at McDonald's now. I'm going to go get a landscaping job for the summer. That's not happening.
To a sense, they never really, sorry to interrupt, but to a sense, they never, we think of them, as this huge iconic band. They never made a living solely off their music. I mean, Tom famously, worked, as a mechanic in a garage, pretty much, through his entire Slayer career.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was never just a musician or just living off the royalty checks. It was like, album's done, tour's done, time to go be a grease monkey and fix some cars.
Yeah. So, and another thing that, I wonder, did I change or did the band change? And, maybe it's part of both, but Creator is one of those examples that always comes to my mind. You grow up, you don't want Creator to sound any different than Pleasure to Kill or Extreme Aggression. You want them to be your Creator all the way through. And I know TJ was saying, my Metallica is, kill them all through Master. That's it. My Creator is through Extreme Aggression. And here's a band that had an identity crisis. They did Endorama, which is a kind of a pseudo thrash goth record. It's like pissed off people all over the world, but they come around and they've changed over the years through time, and they're still a viable band. So, Slayer, other than one or two little things that they did to their sound here and there, they still sound like Slayer. It's maybe a little tiring. So what do we want? Do we want a band to stay the same forever like Slayer has, or do we want a band to evolve and change and then maybe not be happy with the way it works out like Metallica, you know, and kudos to Metallica. They made a career of it. They made the right choices. They're bigger than any band on the planet in any genre. It's crazy. But so yeah, I would say, did I change or did the music change? And I would say it's a little bit of both. I can still hold on to these early albums. It's my nostalgic shield. I'm still sitting in my childhood bedroom reading the lyrics and headbanging along to some of this stuff. And I've heard it all before. I heard it a little bit better. And, you know, even though albums like World Painted Blood and Repentless are damn good records, is it ever going to be held as high as regard as the early stuff? I mean, we need a little time for that to see if that's going to be the case. But the answer is probably not. But anyway, yeah, that was a little bit of a roundabout way to get into this, I guess. But I figured, you know,
it was going to come up. So now
it was going to come up one way or the other.
Conversation to lead in with.
Does anybody have anything to add before we started getting into the nuts and bolts of this?
I am good, Melanie. Yourself?
No, I'm good. I think somebody mentioned that Tom Araya was a certified respiratory therapist, which is even funnier to think about. Somebody who abused his lungs on the side.
So yeah, take a deep, steady breath like this.
The scream in Live Undead on South of Heaven. You scream like this and you'll be just fine. Yeah. But okay, we'll start with you, Melanie. Let's start with 1983's Show No Mercy.
Yeah. So funny thing is, this was not my first Slayer album. In fact, I did not like this album for a long time, up until probably in my 20s when I started really diving into their discography. And now it's obviously one of my favorites. I think has some of the best Slayer songs they've ever written. Metal Blade Days, highly did not get appreciated when it was released as much as it probably should have. I think it's probably one of the all-time classic thrash records as a whole, probably one of the best thrash records ever made, in my honest opinion. Yeah, I don't know. It took me a while to really fall in love with this. I think it has a pretty, underground cult following. A lot of Slayer fans that love this album. Like they hold it very in high regards. They don't even think about anything past Hell Awaits. Like it's this and Hell Awaits, and then that's about it. Like they don't like Rain and Blood because it's the commercially one that everybody knows Slayer by. But in terms of like my rankings and stuff, after listening to it several times again this week, because admittedly it's not the one that I pull out the most. In terms of the Slayer discography, I think this is probably going to be at my number 3 in my ranking. So there are 2 other albums over this that I tend to listen to more, pull out more, enjoy more of a nostalgic thing. And this is one that I definitely have now an appreciation for. I think it's just, it's evil sounding. It's a really great, like raw sounding thrash record. That's what I absolutely love about it. I think it's probably, in terms of the thrash metal sound of Slayer, probably one of their better thrash record sounds that really like created this genre of thrash that I think people are still trying to like, mimic this sound in their music nowadays, but they just can't get to it. I don't think anybody's ever gonna make something that sounds as good as this, in my opinion. And favorite song is obviously the last song, Show No Mercy. Self-title on this album is great. Also, is this only like 28 minutes or something like that? Was this the album that was like, they were like, are you sure that this is all you want to put on this album, or was that Rain and Blood? I can't remember.
Rain and Blood is shorter. This one's 35 minutes and change.
Okay, 35 minutes. So it's not a dedicated listen. 35 minutes goes by quick. I like Tom Araya's voice in it. I just like how you can tell, like, they're young, they're finding their sound. It's got a lower quality sound of budget in terms of recording. I think they paid for this themselves, from what I understand, in terms of recording this. I think that's what I remember reading. And then Brian Slagel from Metal Blade like helped out with Hell Awaits a little bit more in terms of the recording times. I just think in terms of of just like how iconic it is and stuff like that, I think people should really consider this to be like one of the greatest thrash records ever made. But yeah, it's my number 3, solely just because of nostalgia, though.
Right
You'll
on.
see why.
Okay, Alan, what do you think about Show No Mercy?
I like Show No Mercy. I like it very much. It came out, at the very tail end of 1983. I've seen some people call it the first extreme metal record. I think those folks forget Venom beat them to the punch by quite a bit, actually. But you can make a case this is the first extreme metal record from an American band. I'm not sure if anything would really predate it there. You have Kill 'Em All did come out earlier in 83, but do we call Kill 'Em All an extreme metal album? I don't know. Slayer was definitely more extreme in their visuals and their kind of over the top satanic.
But there's a lot of similarities between Kill 'Em All and Show No Mercy.
Musically, yes, there absolutely is. You're right, and that kind of leads, the next big point. While this, you can think of this as a good thrash album, it's not. It's that very early kind of style of thrash where it still has a lot of similarities. They're drawing on new wave of British heavy metal influences. They're taking, Judas Priest's Hellbent for Leather and speeding it up a lot. It's not thrash in the conventional sense that we know it from a few years after this point in the timeline. And you see this from a lot of the bands from that era with their first album, Kill 'Em All. It's got, this very heavy new wave of British heavy metal influence. Overkill's Feel the Fire, falls in this category. Anthrax's Fistful of Metal. Those albums all have, a very solid traditional metal structure, just kind of sped up and made more intense. For a lot of those bands, it's the second album where all of a sudden, there's, this more heavy, emphasis on, the thrash riffing kind of coming into its own as a very distinct style. None of that's a bad thing about Show No Mercy whatsoever. Right? It's all very good things. It's a high energy album. Like Melanie's saying, they're very young, they're having fun, they're out to conquer the world, and they're going to, go as hard as they can. This band was famous for the amount of practicing they did. That they really put the hours in to hone these songs, be able to deliver them not just in the studio but also in the live environment. Brian Slager's been quoted tons of times saying that that was one of the big things. He knew Slayer was going to be big simply because of how hard they were working at getting their songs and their sound down compared to so many other bands, which maybe practiced a couple of times a week, but maybe the emphasis was more on partying or hanging out or doing other stuff. But Slayer was absolutely very focused on getting their chops down and just sharpening them to a razor's edge. And it shows. It's a great album. The production is of its time. It's maybe a bit thin sounding by our standards today, but it's got a great track list. Looking over it here, the opening salvo of songs, you got Evil Has No Boundaries, Antichrist, Die by the Sword. All of side A is pretty much classic. And then you've got a lot of great ones on side 2 also. Black Magic is cool. Cryonics is, a very cool song. Melanie mentioned Show No Mercy. There's, not really much in the way of weak spots on the album. Slayer, of course, pretty quickly after this, yes, the songs get heavier and darker, and we'll be talking about that here in a few minutes. So this album's, it stands out in their catalog a little bit because it's the only album they made in this style before, developing into that, those thrash chops more. For me, my favorite album by Slayer has changed over time, and so if you ask me in another day, in another year, it may be different, but most of the time it's this one. Most of the time I do have Show No Mercy ranked as number 1. There are others that are very close, but this one, it's a very fun listen. It's a classic listen. I really do I gravitate towards the albums from this era, this very early epoch of US metal getting off the ground. All those albums I mentioned before, Feel the Fire, Fistful of Metal, Kill 'Em All, Show No Mercy. This is my jam. This is stuff I really, really like. And even though the bands did lots of great stuff later, this era of those debuts has a really special place for me. So I'm putting Show No Mercy at #1 in the Slayer catalog, which means for the next couple of hours, it is all downhill from here.
Right.
All right. I've gushed about the album enough. Marty, what do you think of this one? Where have you got it?
Well, again, we mentioned the connection to Kill 'Em All, which also came out in '83. And they're both Southern California bands, LA area. And both of these bands started off as kind of cover bands. And they were both influenced by similar bands. New wave of British heavy metal. Slayer was a little bit more Merciful Fate influenced, although they did, like Alan said, jam on the Priest and on the Maiden and the Merciful Fate. And they slowly started crafting their own songs. It was pretty clear that what was going to come out was going to be influenced by what they've been playing, leading up to this and learning on. So, yep, there's a definite new wave of British heavy metal spirit to this record, and they made it darker, they made it heavier, they made it a little faster. And this is a unique Slayer album in their catalog because they never came back to the sound again. Granted, they still sound like Slayer on this and moving forward, but they changed a little bit on the next record. But this is my favorite Slayer record. I'm one of those guys, Melanie. I'm the one that's like, yep, this is, every single song on here. The Antichrist Evil Has No Boundaries. What a savage opener to an album. That is just a savage track. Antichrist, the riffs. Holy crap. Memorable riffs. Die by the Sword, the riffs, the hook. Fight Till Death, I love. Metal Storm Face the Slayer, great instrumental. If I remember right, that's the instrumental, or is that Cryonics? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've spun this. I didn't listen to it this week because I have listened to it so much. But Black Magic, Tormentor, Show No Mercy, absolute classic. My favorite for sure. If I'm going to listen to Slayer, it's this one or Rain and Blood. It's just the way it is. And I kind of wish they did another album in this vein. Just one more.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
It made the transition a little bit more gradual than they did, but love it. #1. But that brings us to, actually, we're not ranking this, but I do want to talk about it.
Yeah, they had some stuff in '84 that at least
I pulled
mention.
it.
Yep.
I pulled it because I know how much you love this.
Oh my God. This is some of their best songs. Chemical Warfare,
Yeah.
Captor of Sin, Haunting the Chapel, Aggressive Perfector, which is a priest cover. Great. And that they made that Aggressive Perfector song sound like a Slayer song. That just shows, like Metallica is a great cover band. They've proven that time and time again. Slayer has the chops for that too. Good ear for it and making it their own sound. And this would be a high ranking too if this was getting ranked, because it's in the Show No Mercy vibe. It's great. Absolutely great fucking songs. Perfect.
Yep.
Melanie, what do you think about Haunting the Chapel?
Yeah, I still listen to this all the time. In fact, every time Metal Blade reissues this, I always buy it. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. And it's such a basic album cover too, but I absolutely love it. I just love the way Haunting the Chapel is made. And the Slayer logo is always going to be my favorite in terms of a logo by a band.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Chemical Warfare is probably one of my all-time favorite Slayer songs.
Great song. Oh my God.
Yeah, and first time I ever heard it live, I think I might have cried. Probably cried a little bit. I'm one of those people that gets the goosebumps and then starts crying just because I'm just so
I do the same thing.
Yeah, this is so good. I probably was drunk too. Because by the time Slayer was going on, I had to listen to so much other shit bands before they finally came on for the night.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this really is probably I think I mentioned in my video earlier today, is one of the greatest EPs ever made, and it's only 3 songs technically.
You're right, Celtic. My bad. Dissident was on the cover of On South of Heaven. You're right.
Yeah.
Aggressive Perfector. Similar title.
I was double checking that, to see if they had if it was on a different version. But thanks, Frosty, for catching that.
Thank you for correcting my stupidity. Anyway, go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, no, I love this. So I pulled it out. And if I had to rank it, it'd probably be my number 2.
It'd be my 1 point. It'd be my 1.5.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, I think I like what they did with this. And again, it's amazing how this continuously sells out too. Metal Blade reissues it. It sells out. It sells for stupid amounts of money sometimes. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because my version of Show No Mercy I got when CDs first started coming out. So I'm assuming it's a first press. It has Haunting the Chapel tacked on the end, which is kind of a brilliant thing since it's all the same era. I think that's actually a good addition where bonus tracks are sometimes hit or miss. That makes sense. What about you, Alan? We want to talk about Haunting the Chapel real quick?
Not much else to say. Yeah, it's a fantastic EP. Yeah, the band was proving pretty fast that they weren't just going to be a fluke or a flash in the pan. That you go from the first album, which generated some hype and some interest. Then you get this excellent EP that comes out, and then the same year you get the Live Undead recording comes out too. That one I like too. It drives me a little nuts. Now some people are irked by the fact that it's not really live. Personally, I don't really care.
I don't care. It's got aggression to it, which could have been live.
The thing that just drives you have to be really mindful of if you want Live Undead. Every time they repress it, they seem to change the track order. That there's a million pressings, and they all have different bonus tracks. And this one will have 2 extra live tracks, and this will have 2/3 of Haunting the Chapel. And I've got 2 or 3 copies of it, and none of them have the same track listing, and it drives me insane.
Hi, Sue.
So
sorry, Sue knows.
Yeah. No, Sue. Hey, good to see you in the chat. So, but yeah, Live Undead's another one that again, 1984, another very classic, beloved recording by the band. It's can just be hard to find a copy that has the exact track list you want on it sometimes.
I don't own it. I've heard it. I've never owned it, and I'll get it eventually. I just never have. It's crazy.
You may have to get 7 or 8 or 9 copies of it if you want to cover your bases.
All right.
But even when it first came out, there were a lot of variations, like the picture disc that Metal Blade made for it has, Lord, I don't know, at least probably 5 or 6 variations to it with just they're little variations, like the color of the outer edge of the vinyl. Some copies are pink, some are black, some are other colors. So it's not a huge must-have things unless you're a sick little monkey. And we don't know anybody like that, so it's not really.
No, we get rid of those people.
Nah.
Tell them to leave the hall.
Exactly. But anyway, some definitely the band was active and still putting out product that people were rapidly gobbling up through 1984 while everybody was waiting for the second album to come along,
which is 1985's Hell Awaits. What do you think about Hell Awaits?
So again, this was one that took me a while to get into my collection in here. I'm a younger kid in this generation. I was 85. I was a year old when this came out. I have this. I'll just start off right at the bat. This is I ranked it number 4.
Hey, me too. You're cheating off my paper.
Listening to it again this week, I people really, really love this album.
They do.
People really love this album. And I think for me, similar to Rain and Blood, listen to it so damn much.
Ryan.
That's funny.
Shut though. That I think I might have gotten tired of it because I listened to it so much when I finally was able to get my hands on it and put it into my collection. But again, this is leaps and bounds in terms of the sound of Show No Mercy. So this is what I was right. Show No Mercy was completely funded by the band. They recorded this on their own money, and then Brian Slagel, he funded recording of this one. So the recording production is a little bit better on this one. You can definitely hear that. But in terms of album artwork for the Slayer album artwork, which they just don't have great album artwork as we get farther along, one of my favorite album arts, that's for sure. Yeah, I like this album. I love it. It's number 4. I think it's obviously a classic Slayer album. Hell Awaits, just the title track starts off amazing. Kill Again is a great song. It's got that chunky bass. Oh my God, the bass on this record is so good. And they really, really make it sure that you hear it on this album. It's not buried in the mix at all.
Yep.
Tom Araya's scream on Kill Again. I remember the first time ever hearing that. I was like, oh my God. But again, I think my favorite song on here is Necrophiliac. When Tom towards the end is like, hell. And I remember the first time ever hearing it, like, oh my God, this is such evil shit. Oh my God. But yeah, I think I've just listened to it so much that I prefer listening to some of their other albums a little bit more. So yeah, I ranked it at number 4. And they just reissued these, and I finally picked it up on vinyl for the first time last year, because it was hard to get up until then. So yeah, it's a great album. Definitely iconic. Some of the best Slayer songs. I think when I heard the first time I ever heard Kill Again live was one of those moments. I was like, oh my God. So
Come the waterworks.
yeah. I think this is definitely like Dave Lombardo's one of his best albums in terms of what he's doing on the kit. Just he gets a little bit progressive in some of his drumming.
Yeah.
I think so I really like that.
His fills get crazier as he goes on, though.
They do, but this was pretty organic and with what he was doing. So there's definitely that too.
All right, Alan.
Yeah, so the band definitely getting darker and more intense here, and some of that's the production. Folks are chatting about this. Yeah, it's the bass sounds very loud and heavy. For some people, they really like the production. It feels a little dark and suffocating, but for other people, it does sound a little off. For me personally, it doesn't bother me a ton, but it's not my favorite Slayer production either. It doesn't really win me over or ruin the album for me. For me, this album, Side A is great. I love Side A on this. Hell Awaits. And somebody, it may have been Ryan, had mentioned that, yes, the very slow build, at the beginning with them, chanting "Join Us" backwards over and over and getting louder and louder. Really good. It sets, that creepy vibe right off the bat. Melanie mentioned, the cover art, it just kind of, goes with it. It really is developing, that, this isn't, a cartoonish Satanism, band like Venom was, where it's just obviously very over the top and tongue in cheek. This one is, a much creepier, darker, scarier kind of take on it. And everything they're doing, getting this album, your immediate impressions with the intro and the cover art, they're all really driving that message home. Kill Again, great track. The third one is one of my favorite Slayer tracks of all time, At Dawn They Sleep, the vampire track. I've just always really loved. So fantastic all the way through Side A. For me, Side B isn't as strong. And I know that's heresy to some people. Like you said, Melanie, there are some people that really, really just hold this as a flawless album. Side B, it's not that the songs are bad, but there's one thing that's noticeable. There's, only 7 tracks on here. The whole album runs 37 minutes. You still have 3 tracks all of a sudden that are over like the 6-minute mark, and a 4th one that's over the 5-minute mark. These are taking a little more time, and I feel like some of them would have been more effective if they'd chopped a minute off of them. Right away on Side B, Praise of Death's a good example of this. Listening to the album, really closely this week and last week, it's like they really didn't need to go back through the verse and the chorus that last time in the song. There's literally actually a pause. And it's like, if the song ended right there, it'd be really good. But then they kind of go back through it all one more time. And it's just like, that wasn't necessary. That's just dragging it out a little bit.
I really like, though, in that song, the back and forth that Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman do. I think that's what really stands out. That's probably one of my favorite songs on the album. So it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah. It's not that it's a bad song. It's just that they could have, they just let it go one iteration through the verse and chorus too much. Necrophiliac's a cool song. Crypts of Eternity is certainly not bad. None of these are bad, but it's just that, they start to feel like, whereas, Side A comes out and just really, kind of, grabs you and, shakes you, and, Side B doesn't do the same thing for me personally. It just doesn't. And the tracks one at a time individually, I like. Hardening of the Arteries, not a bad song at all. But when I play the whole album through start to finish, through Side B, I can just I start to lose a little bit of interest. My attention wanders a little bit. It doesn't hold me all the way through like several of the other Slayer albums do. So, it's certainly not a bad album. I'm still, in terms of like, a letter grade, I'd still give it, it's, solid B or B minus. It's like a 7 or 8 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10, still give it a really good grade, but, it's a step down from, the debut and, not quite on the same platform or level as some of their other albums, but that's just for me personally. Yeah, as such, I've got it ranked one step lower than you do, Melanie. I put it at 5th, and I'm pretty sure that's about where it would stay. It might, I could make a case for it being 4th, but it's not a top 3 album in the Slayer catalog for me. It's never been quite that high. For other folks that have it ranked way up there, that's absolutely cool. I get it. It's one of those classic albums that a lot of folks really do love. So Marty, like myself, you've already used up your number 1. So how high can Hell Awaits get for you?
Reissue. I didn't show my show No Mercy. I grabbed the CD because it's more convenient. But this one didn't connect with me initially as much as Show No Mercy and Rain and Blood did. Again, I would have liked one more Show No Mercy, I guess, and then this is still awesome. Like Alan said, it's a great record. They just went a little bit more aggressive on this one. The riffs are still there, but they're just sped up a bit and not as instantly catchy or iconic, I guess, as the riffs for me on Show No Mercy. But Kill Again, At Dawn They Sleep, Necrophiliac, Crypts of Eternity. I mean, there isn't a bad song on this record. It's them taking their evil up a notch as far as intensity and delivery. And like Melanie said, the drum work is really starting to show signs of evolution. we'll just say evolution before things go completely off the charts. Awesome. But love this record. I had to put it 4th. I'm with Melanie on this. This is my 4th. I couldn't set it in the first 3. I just couldn't. There's no way. Classic, but the EP and the first album and what's coming up sits a little bit higher for me, which leads us to the ever iconic Rain and Blood, 1986.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
This is another one of those albums that I think I just got tired of, just because
Never
just
happens.
everywhere. I don't know. Obviously, I feel like I don't really even talk about this album. Everybody knows this album. Angel of Death is just by far one of my all-time favorite Slayer songs. I don't care about the meaning of it or any of that controversy around it. I never took that as a reason to hate the band or anything like that. If anything, I found it to be interesting. Obviously, not a neo-Nazi, so please don't start screaming at me in the comments. And as a young kid, I didn't really read the lyrics, so I didn't know about any of that controversy until I got older and started hearing about, the shit that people were spewing about it. This is my number 5. And that's simply just because I think I overplayed it in my teenage years. This was Slayer to me. If people talked about Slayer, it was this album. I didn't talk about any other album. This is one that I always listen to. It wasn't the first album I bought, though, ironically. I don't know. I think it's one of those things where I just might have overplayed a little bit too much. Not to say I don't like it. I still love the album. Also, first album on Def Jam, which is interesting. Which is interesting to think about. Rick Rubin really liked them and wanted to record them and sign them. And Def Jam back then was a hip hop label.
Well, they signed Trouble too,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, you're right. And I think
they didn't sign Trouble until much later, though.
Really?
Trouble maybe 90 or 91. So yeah, it was a few years later.
Yeah. My only bad thing to say about this album is I absolutely hate the album cover. And then reading, I guess the band did too. They weren't big fans of it either. I don't know why. I don't know why I don't like it. Obviously, it's a classic, iconic album cover. Everybody knows, and I think there's probably people that absolutely adore it. I just don't care for it all. That's really the only negative. I don't know. It's hard to talk about this album because it's like people just know it. You already know about it. You know all the songs. Can sing it front to back. I know every single song still. Raining Blood still obviously probably one of the greatest songs ever made in metal music. It's everywhere still. I make my kids listen to it because I want them to know that song. Even if they don't like Slayer, they're gonna at least know that song. But yeah, I have this at number 5. I think you guys are probably gonna rank it a little bit higher, I'm sure. It wasn't my first Slayer album, which is interesting to think about. considering how commercial popular it was as I got older.
Right on. And north of the Rockies, Raining Blood is climate change I can get behind. Thank you so much for the contribution. We really appreciate it. You're awesome.
Yes, thank you.
And Alan, your thoughts on Raining Blood?
Yeah, like Melanie said, this is one of the really truly iconic heavy metal albums. I mean, whether you like the band or not, whether you like the album or not, there's no denying this one can make a case for being, someone used this phrase in the chat earlier and I liked it. You could make a case for this one being carved in the Mount Rushmore of, all time, most iconic metal albums. I think they were talking about Chinese food in the chat, but the same analogy applies here. And yeah, so big shift going to sort of a very different kind of label for a metal band, and kind of getting more visibility. Yes, kind of big production. At the same time, the album increases in intensity. It's an blisteringly fast album. It clocks in at under 29 minutes.
Yeah.
Brian and some folks were asking earlier, like, does that even count as an LP? They were kind of thinking it should be listed as an EP based on its length. The vast majority of the tracks are 2 to 3 minutes. I think really Angel of Death and Rain and Blood are the only songs that get anywhere near the 4-minute mark. You have one other song, let's see, Postmortem gets to 3:27, and no other song even makes the 3-minute mark.
So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a punk album too. I mean, the short stature of the songs, it's very much a punk vibe.
You're absolutely right. It does, in terms of just the blistering, straightforward, short songs. It does feel a little bit like a punk or hardcore album in its construction. And for me, that is a little bit of a knock against it. Those styles I don't mind. There are things in those styles I like, but they're not my favorite genres. And if there's a complaint to be made about Rain and Blood, it is that the focus on sheer speed and just sheer intensity throughout tracks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, it can make the album feel a bit one-dimensional. I like the way the album is put together because they did take the two kind of longer quote-unquote full-length songs and used them to bookend the album. So you start with Angel of Death, and like Melanie said, it's a classic track. I never bought into the controversy around the song. It never came across as them glorifying anything about Goebbels or, any of, that shit from Germany. It felt very much like we're singing a song explaining
history
what this
lesson.
guy did.
Yep.
It's more like, here's like, a paragraph summary, book report history lesson thing. It never felt like check out how cool this guy was and doing all this sick stuff, man. It never felt like that to me. I never got that vibe at all. It's just, I think, was emblematic of, it's a band with, creepy, controversial cover art, like Melanie's pointed out. And people, wanting to try, stick them with any kind of negative stuff they could. And then, you get Rain and Blood, bookending it at the other end of the album and doing great. There are a lot of good songs in between. And absolutely. It's not that, they all are just a blur or, cookie cutters at all. Piece by Piece, is good. I like Altar of Sacrifice is really good. Postmortem is a cool track. There are a couple that tend to just speed by. This is an album, if I'm not paying attention when it plays, it can, some of these tracks would, they just disappear and you're just like, what am I on? Track 3? Oh, I'm on track 7. Oops. And that's always been, the one knock against it. It is an album too. I've noticed that. I don't know if this has changed a little over time or with the generation shift or something. There are more people that seem to rank this a little lower or have more complaints about the album than I would have heard 10 or 20 years ago. That, back then, this album was the gold standard for everything, and it still is for a lot of folks. But you see more folks being a little bit more critical of it, in recent years, in terms of it's awfully short, it's awfully, just, fast, whatever. For me, at the end of the day, I still, we give it a very high grade. It's, 8.5 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10, somewhere around there. B+, A- kind of grade range. I've got it ranked though 4th. So, one step higher. Basically, Melanie and I have, swapped places on Hell Awaits versus Rain and Blood. It's, still a very good album and still ranks pretty high. But that's the focus on the speed and all the speed and nothing but the speed. It never wowed me or, blew me away the way it did for some people. And as such, I'd never have had it ranked quite as high as many Slayer fans. But I still think it's an excellent album, and its place in history is undeniable. All right, Marty, I think you've got this one ranked higher than Melanie and I, so your turn.
Yep, it's about the speed, but it's also about the riffs. And I love this record so much, but I also love hardcore and punk. And, I never really thought about it until tonight that the people were talking in the chat that some, hardcore records are under a half hour as well, and they're considered full length. So yeah, this has always been a full length to me. And, yep, it's all about the speed, but it's also the riffs are here. There are sped up fast riffs that are super, super catchy. And really, Tom is cramming a lot of lyrics in to fill these lines, but somehow it all works. There's a synergy to it. It flows so well. And Criminally Insane, 2 times as a teenager, listening to it loudly in my bedroom, my mom opens up the door. Time for dinner. I am yet only just begun to. And as soon as Take Your Fucking Life happens, time for dinner. Nice song, son. I'm like, yes, it is. Twice it happened. It's amazing. Once my buddy was over and we had a laugh about it, but catchy tune, son. One was nice and the other one was catchy tune. I'm like, yeah, I thought so. But anyway, this is my number 2. And man, there's times where it wants to be number 1 for me. I love the speed. I love the intensity of this record. And tell me, Postmortem bleeding into Raining Blood, it's like the 1-2 knockout punch. Postmortem is such a savage fucking song, catchy and just for the throat. Raining Blood is it's a very well written song. I love how it builds. I love the lyrics. The lyrics are sinister and awesome. Raining Blood from a Lacerated Sky, awesome. Bleeding Its Horror, Creating My Structure, Now I Shall Rain in Blood. Fucking awesome. Awesome. This album is top 10 album for me of all time. Love it so much. It's the one I normally listen to when I listen to Slayer. This and Show No Mercy. And the fact that some people don't get it, I guess I understand. Maybe the speed thing, I don't know, but this is the perfect storm of awesome for me. This is a 100 out of 100 record, A+. It should be number 1, but Show No Mercy has got so much character and class and awesome riffs and songs on it. Iconic. They're both iconic records. And that's why Hell Awaits is just outside of the top 3 for me. But it's bookended by 2 albums that are better than it. I mean, this was a transitional record. It's faster, but Rain and Blood took the reins and drove it faster and wrote better riffs to go with it. But great. I love the lyrics. They're really starting to get out of Satanism a little bit and getting more demented lyrically, which is cool. Whether it's historical topics or just strange, fucked up, getting into, schizophrenia or, criminally insane or religion, it's changing a little bit. Necrophobic, Piece by Piece. God, I look at it, I want to listen to it. I wish I was there grabbing for one of those beers too. That looked like a good time. Anyway, killer album, my number 2, which brings us to number 3. Not number 3. That's my number 3. Sorry. I was looking at my paper.
Spoiler
the next
alert.
album, their 4th album, South of Heaven. Spoiler alert. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. So this was the first Slayer album I ever bought with my own money. And I still absolutely love this album. This is my number 2. I'll just say that right now. Ironically, the band hates this album. Kerry King said he's very lackluster on it. They don't play certain songs live because they just don't care about them. I think what they did with this album, they tried their best not to try and do another Rain in Blood. They slowed the tempo down a little bit. And just for whatever reason, I love this album. I love the pacing and Tom's vocals on this. I think he's got stellar vocal performance on this. I think it has some of the catchier songs that I tend to sing and get stuck in my head more. Like South of Heaven starts off, obviously, that song gets stuck in your head, and I'm sure everybody's singing it right now that I've said it. Mandatory Suicide is one of my all-time favorite songs. They do the Judas Priest cover on this, which was kind of random. They threw that in there, but
it works.
It works. I absolutely love this album. It's one of my all-time favorite album artworks. I have a flag actually of this. I was thinking about hanging it up in the background, but I don't feel like digging in boxes and finding it. Like I bought a flag because I love this album so much. And I don't buy it. Like I'm totally not a flag person whatsoever. Yeah, I love this album. I still listen to it all the time.
Put it out on the front door, like one of those flagpoles is hanging out front.
But yeah, I was just reading about it this week and watching some stuff on YouTube and stuff like that and live shows and they play South of Heaven almost every single time they tour or when they tour. Like that was, I feel like it was if you ever saw Slayer, like that was for sure that in War Ensemble and then Raining Blood were like the 3 songs you almost always were going to hear at their show. But every time I absolutely loved it. In fact, I wish Slayer had just, performed this front to back live. I would have spent so much money on that tour and gone to see it. But yeah, I love this album. I love the album artwork. I think this is, what's his name? I forget his name. He did the other ones too. I think this is Larry Carroll. I think this is one of the last good album artworks that they have. And I love this album. I think it's a great album. It's my number 2. My number 1, it's probably not going to be a shocker what my number 1 is at this point, after what's coming next. There's no way in hell it's any of the later albums. That's for sure.
I'll be shocked if it's one of the ones I don't think it is.
No. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the guys really, they were like, we're never going to top Raining Blood. We're not going to try and do anything like that. So they did a different style of album. It's still very much Slayer. It's got slower tempos. It's not nearly as speed aggression as Raining Blood was. And they really shit on it. It's interesting. Like I was reading some of the comments out of some interviews that they've done and like they're like, no, we're not going to perform this song. Like, I think there's like one song that Jeff Hanneman absolutely hated. And he's like, we're never performing that song live. And Kerry King was like, oh, we should. It was Behind the Crooked Cross. Like, oh, we should. It's got a cool intro, which it does. But yeah, they were just really super critical of this. And I think it was hard to come next to this. Like, this is obviously the Slayer album that everybody knows them by. But it's a great album. It also came out on my birthday, July 5th. So a little bit biased there. Yeah, this is my number 2.
All right. Alan, South of Heaven.
South of Heaven. Yep, this one is definitely a change for the band, and as such, it's a bit of a polarizing album. And we're seeing this, in the chat. There are some folks that really like this album. There are some folks that don't consider it very good, that they see this as, kind of the start of Slayer's decline. And that's been a pattern ever since the album came out. One of the big complaints about the album has always been that, yes, it's a lot slower. To be honest, it had to be. What were they going to do after Raining Blood? You really couldn't speed it up much more than that. So they could have done Raining Blood Part 2. Would that have been interesting at the time? Would that have, really been, held on the same level? Unlikely. Some fans would have enjoyed it, I'm sure, but it probably would just have always been considered, it's just, they've just rehashed and did the same album all over again. A change, when you're pushing it, in terms of extremity, you do get to a point where you just can't take it any further. You see the same thing, with bands that, were very technical, lots of prog bands. They got to a certain point where they were doing, 27-minute long, intricate, full out length, song albums. And after that, they eventually just have to dial it back because they can't make it more complicated. With Slayer, I don't think they could have made it any more intense in 1988. And so they very wisely didn't try to. It's maybe, some people may disagree, but I think it was the right choice to try going in a different direction, slow it down and vary the songs a lot more this time. Some folks have pointed out in the comments, they get back to developing this really good evil atmosphere on this album like they had on Hell Awaits, not as, thick or dark or suffocating maybe, But yeah, they're getting that, very creepy vibe back in there that you can only cultivate so much of when you're focused on going 100 miles per hour. At that speed, the atmosphere, can't be quite the same. Slowing it down here, yeah, this album is very creepy. Just those opening chords to the album on the title track, right away, you just kind of like, yeah, this is fucking Slayer. And it's got, a lot of fantastic songs on it. South of Heaven's great. It rolls into Silent Scream really well. That rolls into Live Undead. I love the ending of Live Undead, where it kind of just thump 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 Live Undead, and just kind of stops out of nowhere, just like, shit. Wait, what happened? Where's the rest of it? And then leads into Behind the Crooked Cross, which again, just nasty, killer, dark, scary sounding riff. This is the kind of music you scare grandma with when she doesn't get you what you want for your birthday or whatever. So yeah, it's a good album. Side 2, now again, kind of like Hell Awaits for me. Side 2's not as strong as side 1. Ghost of War is fine. Cleanse the Soul's not my favorite. Spill the Blood's okay. I do like the Slayer cover, the Priest cover. Dissonant Aggressor does feel a little bit like an odd choice. You wouldn't think about it being a great inclusion for a Slayer album, but they actually do. Yeah, a really nice take on it, and it kind of fits the vibe of this album, which is a little slower, but still very creepy, very dark, very what's out there. Great cover art too, as Melanie said. For me, this is also my number 2 on the Slayer list. It does have its issues. It's not a perfect album. Production could certainly be a bit better on it too. That's another thing I think that maybe held this album back some, is that it just didn't, sound as fierce or aggressive as people had gotten used to with Slayer. So, but yeah, I'll put it as number 2. And I get that some people, this is definitely not their era of Slayer whatsoever, but I was an interesting lady, but that is certainly not something we're going to
she wouldn't rank number 2 is what you're saying in grandma's. She would be more of on the 3 or 4 scale.
Yeah, she had her good traits, and she had her bad traits, and we'll just
side 2 of grandma wasn't as good as side 1.
Yeah, we're just that is a direction we will not go on for this cast. But sometimes and no, I never once tried scaring her with music. I saved that for one of my aunts, because it was just fun to see her reactions when you would play Napalm Death or something like that, and like, that's very nice, can you make it go away now? It's like, I can see you grinding your teeth, so yeah, I guess it's time to stop the boombox. But yeah, back on track. Number 2 for me. I've always liked the album. I very much understand why some people don't like this era of Slayer, but for me, it works very, very well. And with that, I will pass it over to Marty and let him give his take on this.
King Diamond wrote an album about it. Good one. All right. Well, I bought this the minute it hit, the nanosecond it hit the racks at Camelot Music, and I couldn't wait to get home. Put this baby on and was filled with instant rage that it wasn't Rain and Blood Part 2. I was one of those Slayer fans. They're like, what happened? They're slow. This sucks. This is crap. It still sounds like Slayer, but this is crap. In fact, I still don't own the CD to this day. And this week, I found out that I listened to this probably the most out of all the Slayer records. I haven't spun it in a while, and putting it on again, holy crap. And I actually sang along with a lot of it, so I apparently over the years listened to it enough to absorb the songs. The song on here, Live Undead, holy shit. It's a slow build-up song, and then Tom hits this scream that like makes my nipples hard every time, and I rewound it about 6 times in a row to get that feeling, because it was kind of cool. And after that, the drum, like Tom was mentioning on the This Is a Drum Clinic, Lombardo, the drum fills in Live Undead are just like, you gotta laugh at how absolutely sick, over the top. I mean, I don't know if he started studying jazz, after Hell Awaits. I don't know what happened, but they sound like these crazy, roll your eyes back in your head jazz fills sped up. It's crazy. What I take away from this record now as an older man is the fact that this is their most mature album. They got the speed out of their system, and they did it in a very awesome way. I mean, Rain and Blood is A+ chef's kiss as far as speed and aggression. This, yeah, I would have liked a Rain and Blood part 2, but they started to nurture the songs a little bit. They started to tone, keep Slayer in more of a mid to slower pace, not doom, but those riffs really could breathe a little bit more in a slower pace. And then, the counter, having those octaves, throwing those guitar octaves in there. Nice touch. A lot of very cool songwriting tricks on here. They got better. The songwriting got better. The drum work, my God, I keep going back to how amazing the drum fills are on this record. And again, Live Undead, I must have listened to 20 times this week. It's a great fucking song. The best song on the album. And yes, Distant Aggressor, that is the Judas Priest song. Sorry. Killer job. And it doesn't throw me off on, I don't think it's out of place. They did it the second to the last track, which is Spill the Blood. And they show that they're a good cover band. They did a great job. They took a Judas Priest song and made a Slayer song. It's very cool. A little bit more of a rockin' flow to it, but this record has really come a long way for me over the years. It's my number 3. It edged out Hell Awaits as the number 3 position. And man, Live Undead, I just can't get over. South of Heaven, great song. Ghosts of War, great song. Behind the Crooked Cross, I love it. It's weird. It's different. There's a weird flow in the chorus. Atypical for Slayer. Still sounds like Slayer, but they're trying some different things. It's probably why they hated it, because it just didn't feel, it felt different for them. I don't know. But Rules, good album. Number 3 for me. Which brings us to 1990s, Season in the Abyss, which I'm gathering is probably Melanie's number 1.
That might be where the safe bets are at.
Yeah.
If it was the first one she heard, that's usually how we metalheads roll.
Let's not steal her thunder, though. Let her.
So-
I don't want to steal her thunder.
First one I ever bought, because I was able to find it in the store, but the first one I ever heard. I sold this off of my brother's CD rack, simply for the album artwork, which now I think is just a stupid ass album cover.
It's not good. It's not good.
But I'm seeing Aaron from Growth Throne right now, who's upset that this is not number 1, but it's my number 1. It's the first Slayer album that I ever heard fully. Something about the song Dead Skin Mask, which is just not a typical Slayer song whatsoever. It's very theatric in a sense of almost as if it were a King Diamond song in that sense. It's
the kids shit in it really creeps the fuck out of me.
So creepy.
Yeah.
And I'm at this time in my life of hearing this, I'm so into King Diamond and Merciful Fate and those types of theatrical type of music. And the first time I ever heard that song, and when that kid came up, I did this whole thing, where is that coming from?
Yeah, I know, it's mixed in a way. It's gives you what the fuck? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's based around that psycho that stole bodies and shit. I can't remember his name.
Ed Gein. Ed Gein.
That, and then War Ensemble is my favorite Slayer song. My dog is barking. I don't know if you can hear her. I don't know what the hell.
That's what she does. She waits till the camera's rolling. She's like, "Now's my time."
It's late at night. Everybody's asleep. I don't know what she could possibly be barking at right now. So I'm sorry if you can hear that. But yeah, War Ensemble is my favorite Slayer song. It was one of those times where I heard it live, cried, could have left and been fine for the rest of the night. Just hearing that live for the first time ever. I listen to this front and back still to this day. It's not your stereotypical Slayer song. There's still some older Slayer elements on here for sure. But it's definitely, I don't know. I just, one of those first time you ever hear it, first time you ever listen to it front to back, it just stuck with me in terms of nostalgia. I still listen to it all the time. Generally, if I'm I'm going to listen to Slayer today, I'll either pull this or South of Heaven. And yeah, I don't know. I love it. I think Seasons in the Abyss is one of their songs that's probably one of their longer songs. I think it's over 6 minutes long.
Yep.
Just the overall themes on it are a little bit different. They definitely got a little bit more creative in terms of their songwriting and what these songs were based around. And yeah, I don't know. It's my favorite. It always has been. I wish they would reissue it more. But yeah, I love this album. I don't know what else to say about it. I think it does. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it does have Dave Lombardo's best solo drum performance and Kerry King's best solos. I was trying to read. There's not a whole lot of like history that you can read about this online. Like I feel like in terms of like reception and stuff like that, there's not a whole lot written about it. But yeah, I love it. It's a great album. My favorite, my number one. After that, it gets a little bit murky for me.
Yeah, they kind of get into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, Alan.
Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. One thing I would disagree with on this one, like the art style they used for, and Rain and Blood. It's it kind of added and fits their just again generally creepy weird serial killer in nasty dark evil vibe quite a bit. It's a strange art style, but yeah, I've always liked these covers. It's not the same style at all, but they always put me in mind a bit of the early Incantation albums, just having that same kind of very twisted. I don't know what's going on here completely, but it is kind of disturbing.
It's weird their logo isn't on the cover.
Yeah, that's true. It's not on this one. Like the album quite a bit. It is in a way, it kind of feels like South of Heaven Part 2, but with the production issues cleaned up. It's a much stronger album in that regard. This is an album I've always thought has an excellent track order, that the songs lead into one another really, really nicely. I would never want to take this album and play it like on shuffle. That would feel so weird. I can't imagine that working very well. The way one track ends and it flows into the next track, but every song is very unique, distinct. They all work incredibly well for the most part. Yeah, there are some, of course, that I like a little more than others. This is an album also. At the time, this was certainly the Slayer album I heard the most. This one was very popular, in the area I was at, in the early 90s, even, straying into the mid 90s, people were still playing this album a ton. So yeah, I cannot tell you the number of times I would hear, Dead Skin Mask or War Ensemble on the Friday and Saturday night college radio, metal shows up in, Northwestern Ohio. So it is a good album. It is one that, taking it off the shelf now, it does come off a little bit less than it did back in the day. Those may be fighting words to Melanie. You might want to delete that post before she reads it.
All I'll say is don't ever invite me for a Megadeth stream, because I'll be that person that's going to drag everybody down.
Those are the people we need in a Megadeth stream. We got to have an offset. Put you and Chromie in the same room and watch you try to kill each other.
Duly noted. But yeah, I don't take this one off the shelf as much as I used to. It has maybe lost a little momentum over time. I'm not burned out on it or anything, but it is one of those albums when I look at it, like, I could play this, but I know these songs very well. Maybe I don't really need to play this one. Maybe I'll play something that, I'm a little rustier on, or something that didn't, hasn't, been spun quite as much. All that said, I still have it ranked as number 3. And I've had it ranked higher in the past, but at least in recent years, I will reach for South of Heaven, and those tracks, maybe just jump out at me a little bit more than the stuff on Seasons. But it's still a very good album, very consistent album. As some folks like Non-Servium have said in the chat, I think almost everyone can agree it's probably their last really great album. Or even if you're not a fan of this era, it's like maybe their last good, solid, passable album. That things are going to start to shift here before much longer. Marty, what is your take on Seasons?
Sorry, the comments. I really like this record when it came out. I really see why they chose War Ensemble as a lead-off track. It's kind of their nod back to Rain and Blood. It's fast, it's furious. Lombardo's insanely amazing fill, like leading into the bridge or whatever the hell it is. It's just, you gotta laugh. It's just insane, over the top insane. You know, Expendable Youth, not a big fan of that song. More or less, it's a good album, and it ended up being my number 5. I don't have a lot to say on it. I think South of Heaven is a better album in hindsight. Back then, I preferred Seasons of the Abyss because it was faster, a little more aggressive. South of Heaven, just my initial impression stuck for so long, and it's unfortunate because I robbed myself of a lot of years of true enjoyment of that record. But I like this one a lot. Like I said, number 5, that's right up there. I mean, after this, they start to fade away. I mean, this is 1990. We're starting to get into a time where thrash and styles are starting to collide a little bit. You know,
winter is coming.
Winter is coming for thrash metal for sure.
Yeah, and just for bookkeeping purposes, it should be no surprise. But just to make it official, we were 5 albums in, and we have all used ranks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in different orders.
Yep.
But none of these albums have been ranked lower than 5 by anybody.
Yep.
And we have 6 albums left to go. So I think there's a very clear division in the catalog that we're about to document.
And all I gotta say is what Carcass and Morbid Angel came out in 1989. That's to be duly noted. Entombed,
the Black Album and Nevermind came out in 91, and that's also
to be noted.
Posts to be noted.
And Entombed's Left Hand Path came out, I think, 1990, didn't it? The same year as this. So yeah. That is where my allegiance started to shift quite quickly into the heavy, detuned, fast death metal realm. But
MC Hammer came out in 1992, Marty.
What did?
MC Hammer.
Hammer Don't Hurt Him. Yep. Oh, don't. It's there. It's like brain cancer. That song is like brain cancer. Once you got it, you're doomed. Anyway, Melanie, you're up. Divine Intervention, 1994.
Big 4-year gap here.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is the second departure of Dave Lombardo, if you count the first one where he was gone for like a month. And then he came back and still recorded. We've got a new drummer. I really did not like this album when I first heard it at all. It really kind of struck me as this is their sellout album. This is an album that they just made for the record label. It just really didn't sit well with me. I was that person that bought it probably as soon as it came out, and then didn't really care too much for it. I think like that pretty much is what sold me on it. It's like, oh yeah, cool. Slayer's going, gross now. I listened to it this week. This is one that I rarely ever pull off the shelf. It sits there, and I think I probably appreciate it a little bit more now. It's got kind of just that like metal sound to me, not so much of the thrashy sound. I don't know. I like it a little bit more now that I've listened to it. But I have this at my number 7. So yes, there is something that ranks higher than this, which you'll be probably be shocked about. I don't hate it as much now. I think this has some more themes of serial killers. I think there's a song about Jeffrey Dahmer on here and stuff like that. So they're starting to, they're still doing those types of things in their songwriting. I think there are also some more Nazi stuff on here that people got pissed off about in Raised Hell. I think what's the song, SS3 or something like that. I like it now. Not as much as the other albums, obviously. I don't really have a whole lot of positive things to say other than it's an okay album to me. It's not horrible. It's not great. It's really just in the middle line. And yeah, the production really didn't do much for me on there. But yeah, I mean, I've seen several of the songs live. They sound great every time I've seen Slayer. I was one of those people that have never seen Slayer be bad live, so I guess I got lucky. But this was one of the albums that I just never really gravitated towards it, and I really don't like the album cover either. It reminds me of like that 2000s like death metal kind of cover for whatever reason, even though it came out in the 90s. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot of feelings. I could have put this anywhere between 6 and 12 It just doesn't. It's not an album that wows me all that much.
All right, Alan, Divine Intervention.
All right, I've got a little different take on this one than Melanie does. Yeah, I remember this one. Yeah, coming out. This is a weird 4-year gap. When Slayer did Seasons in the Abyss in 1990, thrash was still a very huge deal. Yes, the writing was kind of on the wall, but nobody was noticing it because thrash bands were still doing huge business, especially among the big four. And Slayer does all kinds of world tours, and you have the Live Aggression 2 CD set comes out around this time, and so there's this big gap. And when Slayer comes back with Divine Intervention, the musical landscape's completely different than what it had been 4 years earlier. Let's think. What have the other big four thrash bands been doing in the interim? Metallica has released the Black Album to the delight of frat boys and cheerleaders around the world. Dave Mustaine saw that and was like, "Ooh, I can make a sucky album too," and started counting down to his own extinction. Testament decided that they would bore us with the ritual. It would still be a thrash album, but let's make it as just kind of let's make it long and kind of
It's kind of boring. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's got Electric Crown. We'll make a video for Headbangers Ball for Electric Crown because that song does kick some ass. And then we're going to play about 50 more minutes of music. But we're getting older and more mature now, and we've kind of lost our edge just a little bit, even though technically we're still pretty good.
Overkill did WFO.
But before that, they had heard Black.
That album
and made this just sad sack album of how hard it is. And
we like Alice in Chains too.
Yeah, we can be dark and moody too, guys. We really can. Fucking shitbag of an album.
It is terrible. They're only really, really bad one.
Well, fair enough. And they did bounce back pretty quick with WFO by 94, but the damage was kind of done. Anthrax was busy listening to White Noise with John Bush, who is a great vocalist and never fit in that band. It's like trying to put a round peg into a 15-dimensional triangular shape that you can only see if you're on the Lovecraftian dimension where dimensions and angles work differently. But here's Slayer. Here's the thrash band, the most intense, the most evil. They're coming back, and so there was a lot of hype for this because people hadn't heard a particularly great thrash album from any of the big name bands for several years at this point. And
if I open it,
let's see. Oh, sorry. And it's not a bad album. It's really not. Matt, as you said earlier, yes, production not great. I don't mind the cover art. It's certainly not their best. It's not their worst. It feels safer, of course, compared to a lot of the more controversial art they'd used earlier in their career. Lombardo's gone and all that. But when it came out, there was a lot of hype, a lot of anticipation, and folks in general, the consensus take seemed to be, and I'm trying to remember, 30 years ago at this point, that it was a good album, but it wasn't as good as what had come before. That, it's like, it's Slayer. It's still a solid Slayer album. They hadn't sold out, for whatever else you do or don't like about the band or this album. They hadn't tried to record their own take on the Black Album.
Risk.
They weren't doing Risk or, Testament's Low, which isn't a terrible album, but, it shows the band doing some different kind of stuff. It wasn't I Hear Black or The Sound of White Shit Noise. It wasn't any of those things. It was still a really solid Slayer album. But 4 years had gone by. Extreme metal had also changed. Thrash was completely off the radar. And as such, Slayer wasn't having to compete with Testament anymore, Exodus. Slayer was having to compete with
Pantera, Machine Head,
Deicide. They were on a popular note. Yes, exactly. Mark. They're having to compete, with the knucklehead, angry, stuff with Pantera and Biohazard. They're also having to compete with black metal at this point. It's like, we're going to sing about a serial killer. Fuck that. We're going to pick up a knife and stab each other a whole bunch of times. You carve your logo in your arms. I stick my knife in the back of the guy, whose record label I'm being released on. It's a completely different ball game, in '94.
Oh, just kids being kids, really.
I know, you silly kids,
crazy kids.
And Slayer's, the old guy on the block at this point. And music, it's definitely, you had a younger generation listening to different things, coming into metal with more extreme things than Slayer. At this point, Slayer doesn't scare anybody anymore. Slayer, they can, yes, Melanie's right, they still generate some controversy with this album. The lyrics are still, pretty creepy and sick. But we've been listening to Cannibal Corpse records for 3 or 4 years at this point. Is anybody really that put off by, lyrics and, the, 213 song or anything like that? So it's an album that is not bad and, fared okay at the time, but it didn't have the same impact, and it couldn't because of when it was released and what the musical ecosystem was like by that time. Like Melanie, I hadn't played this one in a very long time when I revisited it this week. Song by song, I think a lot of them are still pretty decent. I love Killing Fields. I like that as the opening track. It right away lets you know that there's no bullshit here. Again, we're not going grunge on you. This is an alternative. We haven't, put on flannel shirts or any of this, grunge shit. This is still going to be a Slayer album, and I like that track for it. A lot of them are okay. Sex, Murder, Art, it's a very short one, but very effective. Ditto Head always confused me. The one thing that does creep in here a little bit, you do get some odd song titles with like Ditto Head and 213. And yes, I know these had specific meanings that tied into some of the creepy stories and stuff. But just looking at the track list, some of them are kind of head scratchers just a little bit. So there's maybe that one little hint of 90s weirdness where every song title had to be like, 1 4-letter word long or something. So I've talked about this album far too long already. So let me wrap this up and say I've got it ranked 6th. It's a very solid 6th. It does not challenge any of the albums that came before it. It is better than any of the songs after it. It's right there in the middle of the pack. And while I do like it, other than Killing Fields, there's no track I ever really came back to on this album. So I think it's decent. It's a solid enough Slayer album, but it lacks the standouts. The band just doesn't have the same impact at this point. They're no longer kings of extremity and scariness and evil and metal. They in the 4 years that went by, they had definitely lost that title, and it does hurt this album's legacy some. Sorry, didn't mean to talk about that one this long, but
no, it's great.
There we go. Yep, and so pass it over to you, Marty.
Well, first thing of note is, this is the dumbest slip cover ever. Yeah, it's got the die cut, but it's just whatever. OG Press, bought the day it came out. Wes Ben Scotter, cover art. The first thing of note is after 11 years of existence as the same members, this is their first lineup change. Paul Bostoff on drums has entered from Forbidden, which was a great band in their own right. I bought this because you're just buying Slayer records is what you did. And I did listen to this a bit when it came out. Listening to it again this week reminded me about it. And it's kind of funny that they follow this up with a punk covers album, because this has a bit of a punk vibe to it. It really does. I don't know if it's the production. I don't know what it is. The aggression of it. There's something about it that's kind of gave me a bit more of a punk vibe, even though it's still Slayer being Slayer. This is where I jump off. This is where I'm done. I've moved on. This, looking back now, yeah, it's me. Slayer, you're still Slayer. You're doing Slayer things, going out in the big Slayer world. I'm just not along for the ride. I've moved on to more aggressive things.
Exactly.
Yep. Like in young kids in the woods, doing their pensive sky gazing in their mom's Maybelline. I dig that. It's just time for me to move on. It's not you, it's me. And so with this record, I listened to it, I enjoyed it, and I was done with Slayer for, well, this is the last Slayer album I bought. So this was my departure from this band. And for me, I put it at number 6. It's just like Alan said, it's a solid 6. There's no other really place to put it. It's not fair to put it any lower. It's not fair to put it any higher. It's just a 6 album all the way around. Yeah, which brings us to Undisputed Attitude, which we considered maybe not covering because it's a covers album, but
if folks have something to say about it, that's fine.
Yeah. Melanie, let's talk about Undisputed Attitude.
Well, I just got this
Justify
yesterday.
your Amazon purchase.
I just got this yesterday. I purposely never bought this album because it was a covers album. I'm not that into punk. Hardcore is a very hit or miss genre for me. I never considered it a Slayer album whatsoever. I listened to it for the first time this week digitally, and then I got the album just to complete the collection because I'm that asshole that does that. This is my number 12 album. I just don't care for it. Whatever. I know a lot of people say they do really good punk covers. So maybe someday I'll appreciate punk for what it is, but this just doesn't really do anything for me at all. I know that they really they have a lot of punk influence in their lives, and so I understand why they did the cover album. So not to say it's a terrible album, it's just not for me at all. So probably will never listen to this after this stream again. But I'm a completist. So
You're one of those people.
I don't consider it a Slayer album. I just don't. That's why I put it last. But I guess if I were to not think of it as a Slayer album, I would probably like it. I think that's what kills it for me. The fact that it's just a covers album that Slayer's doing. But yeah, I'm not a hardcore punk person. It's not a genre that I was ever gotten into in my life. I listen to it probably a little bit more now than I ever have but that's the only reason why. So don't take my word for it. Marty and Alan probably have better things to say about than I do. I had no intentions of even talking about this tonight. And then I was like, I probably should at least listen to it because it is considered one of their albums, even though I think it's dumb that they consider that album. Yeah, that's all. I think you guys probably have better things to say about it.
All right, Alan.
I don't have a lot to say about it. I did hear it a lot when it came out because one of my buddies was a big punk fan and a big Slayer fan, so this meshed really well for him. I didn't buy it myself. I just heard it ad nauseum whenever I was riding around in his car or stuff. It's okay for what it is. It's kind of fun. I'm not huge on albums that are just cover songs in the first place. So yeah, I don't really consider it a real quote unquote Slayer album. It's kind of like one of those it's like the equivalent of like a live album or a greatest hits album. It's one of those things you kind of do in between your regular studio albums. It's fine that they did it. Nothing wrong with it. Hey, it was a Slayer album. It, a couple of songs generated controversy even off of this, even when they're just doing a cover album. They still, manage, to, get under people's skin with a couple of the tracks. But whatever. I haven't heard it in ages. I did not replay it this week. It's not for me. I'm not going to rank it because, yeah, I didn't even replay it, and I don't really consider it, part of the Slayer discography of actual, original Slayer material. So that's all I'll say about it. Marty, on over to you.
I like punk and hardcore, and I spun this for the first time this week. I enjoyed it, and it really appealed to the punk edge of Slayer, and Tom Araya's voice is built perfectly for punk and hardcore. I thought, is this a necessary album? No, it's necessary, about as necessary as Garage Days by Metallica, but for some reason that Garage Days record rules. It just rules. It's a great covers album. And you got, what do we got here? Verbal Abuse covers, TSOL, Pap Smear, Minor Threat, which is a personal favorite of mine. I love Minor Threat. A lot of Verbal Abuse, DI, Dr. No, DRI, Violent Pacification. The Stooges. The controversy, we were talking about this before we went live. It was supposed to be I'm going to be your dog, but it's I'm going to be your God. And they changed the line in Guilty of Being White, and I guess it raised a stink, because that's what Slayer does. They do things like this to gain publicity. But overall, if I found this in a used bin, I would buy it. I would listen to it and I would enjoy it, because I think Slayer, being a punk band, it works, man. It's not that far out of their wheelhouse. It's kind of always been a vibe they had here and there. But Tom's voice, like I said, it's suited very well for this style of music. I don't know. I dig it. It's number 10 on my list, because I mean, whatever. It's a whatever release for me. So out of 12 releases, it's number 10. So it's not high praise, but I was quite pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Melanie, let's talk about Diabolos in Musica, 1998.
I fucking hate this album.
It is not good. Not good.
Technically, it's my least favorite Slayer. Like, this probably should be number 12. Undisputed Attitude probably is a little bit better, even though it's not my thing. I do own it because, again, I'm a completist, and I think I bought this when it first came out too. New metal, groove metal. Kerry King wrote most of this album.
That makes sense.
And it really changed my viewpoint of Kerry King. Unfortunately, after this album, he redeemed himself towards the end of the career. But this album is just not good at all. There's a couple of things here that I can kind of get behind. But I liked some new metal, and I liked, I loved Pantera and stuff like that. But this was an album that they were just really trying to fit in with the scene at the time. It was very different in terms of that. Like, there's still some Slayer elements to it. I just don't. And I think, like, even Tom Araya kind of gave a little bit of shit about some of, like, the lyrics and stuff like that, which is saying something considering what they put out in the past. Even he kind of was like, I don't know about this album. But yeah, it was very, I think what the word I'm looking for is a little bit just that sound of music that I just don't ever really feel like going back and listening to
Alan.
again. Yeah, it's definitely a new metal sound. I hear it. It's just not. I couldn't even get through it this week. I tried really hard. Thought maybe after never hearing it for years and years and years, something would stick with me. And I'm not. I don't know. I don't like this album at all. I think it's garbage. I wish they had never released it, but not every band can be perfect in your eyes. But again, completist mentality. I got it for that. Yeah, it was a waste. You're right. It was a waste. I don't know. And I think it did relatively well in terms of sales, though, which I was shocked about when I was reading. Like, it was on the U.S. Billboard 200. It came in at 31. So that's probably just people just buying because it's Slayer. I'm assuming it would have to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Also, like, it just looks like a new metal record.
Yeah, it does.
Like, that's not even their logo. Like, what were they thinking? I'm going to be like Alan right now. What the fuck were they thinking not using their logo? Like, it's not even, I don't even know. Like, this looks like a cover album, like a cover band that's doing Slayer. Like, I don't know. That makes me angry alone. That alone. But yeah, I don't like that album. I don't never want to listen to it again after today.
All right, Alan.
Well, they divine intervention. They had held up the thrash flag nice and proud and avoided the Black Album, Sound of White Noise, Countdown to Extinction, Quagmire. They held out as long as they could, but even they had to succumb to that just 90s absolute malaise of what happened to metal bands. All you have to do is look at this album, and shit's gone wrong. Like you were saying, Melanie. What kind of logo is this? You've got that double printed S, a capital epsilon for an E. It's not even a real font. It's just like random characters strung together to make the letters. What's that about? Then there's, the actual image on the cover. I think the best description of this I've heard, and I think it may have been from the Auto Thrall review of this album, maybe not. What's happening with this guy on the cover? He looks like Jack Skellington fucked Billy Corrigan, and somehow they gave their bastard child Christian superpowers. What's going on here? It just makes who was this supposed to appeal to? The Christian kids who wanted to listen to Marilyn Manson? Because why is the cross is right side up? Why? Huh? Yeah. The song titles, once you get into those little short one word, short song titles, Desire, Point, Scrum, Fuck This. It's Slayer succumbing to the, trends of the mid and late 1990s. I will offer at least a rationale. I'm not even going to call it a defense because the album's pretty indefensible. It's easy, though, I think, for us to look at it, now 25 years later and just crap all over it like we're doing, because the album deserves it. At the time, and some folks in the chat are saying that the band wasn't interested or felt contractually obligated. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's them trying to sugarcoat it later on. I don't know. What I do know is that around this time frame, 97 into 98, even the big bands from the 80s, even the big metal bands, were struggling to find any kind of audience or play anywhere. In like late 97, early 98, Testament came to town and they played to maybe 150 people in a cowboy bar. There was no market for traditional thrash. And at that time, a lot of folks just assumed metal was done in the United States. Sure, some bands and some styles of metal were still doing well in other countries. That was completely unknown to us for the most part in the US. There was no YouTube. There was no internet. You didn't get the sense that, oh yeah, Running Wild still sells out Japan all the time. We didn't know that. We didn't know Running Wild was still putting out albums. We didn't know most of these European bands were still around. The albums they were making were almost impossible to find in the US unless you bought expensive imports. All that we knew was that, in the 1990s, metal kind of seemed like it had done what every other popular music fad had done over the past couple of decades. Something comes along, makes a splash for a while. There in the 80s, yeah, there's a period where, every kid's got a denim jacket and they're listening to the Twisted Sister and maybe the Iron Maidens and the Judas Priest. And then those kids grow up and they, throw all those albums out and they get a haircut and they go get a job in a cubicle. And the next generation of kids that came along, they did what every other generation of kids do. They completely rejected everything the previous batch of kids had liked. You guys liked metal? Well, we think that's lame. We're going to listen to grunge and alternative. We're going to adopt our own musical identity and latch on to something different. Nobody thought about heavy metal having this big revival once you got into the 21st century. Nobody thought about us growing up, getting older, and still wanting to hear this and be willing to pay lots of money for merch and tickets to see these bands come back around and be able to play big places. If you're a guy in Slayer or one of these other bands in 1997 and 1998, you've got to face some pretty fucking hard facts. There's no audience for your music in this country. If you want to continue making music and sell any of it and have any chance of touring and doing this kind of stuff that you've done for 10 or 15 years and loved, you better fucking change your tune or you're done. And so Slayer changes their tune here. The album, you're right, Melanie, it did sell well on release because it was a Slayer album. It got lampooned pretty hard, pretty fast by, what real metal fans, you could string together on early internet chat forums around 98, 99. But I guess, again, it's sort of irrational. if you look at it from that context of what was happening in 97, 98, you can be a little more forgiving and think, well, shit, what would you have done? You've been in this big band. You've had big record sales in the past. And all of a sudden, you can't give your shit away. There's no tour to join. But hey, you know, this Marilyn Manson guy, the kids seem to love that. That's selling records. That's kind of extreme. Is it that different from what we've done in the past? Could we kind of lean into that a little bit? Well, if we want to still have a career in music, maybe we better fucking try, because we ain't getting anywhere with the traditional styles of music at this point. As far as everyone knows, that stuff is extinct. It's dinosaurs. It's done. As we know, it didn't play out that way long term. That, you know, the metal underground was more resilient than that, and everyone kind of rediscovered and has a fondness for that stuff later. But you couldn't have known that in 1997. You could not have known that, thrash metal and traditional metal and 80s power metal had any future whatsoever. So that is, I will offer that rationale for why Slayer had to make this album in 1997 and release it in 1998. That said, it's still a horrible album. I rank it number 11. I give it a grade of F. As Melanie said, there's a couple of tracks on it here and there that are okay. There's a couple towards the end in particular. Scrum is not bad. I think it's Screaming from the Sky. Yeah, okay. There's some songs with some passable ideas at work here, but there's a lot of garbage. It is not a worthwhile album for most Slayer fans. Bottom of the stack, absolutely a terrible album, but I guess maybe I know why they had to make it. Marty, what do you think of all this?
I agree with all that. And I'm going to say, isn't Slayer on like the Ozfest and the Lollapalooza tour circuit? Aren't they mixing it up? They're a bigger band working with all these other bands. I mean, let's look at bands they're friends with and rubbing elbows with. They're rubbing elbows with Korn. They're rubbing elbows, big friends with Pantera. Not that Pantera sounds like new metal, but there's a knuckle dragging contingent to that type of music. And, Korn's popular, Limp Bizkit's popular, all that shit's going on. It's going to rub off, especially if you're on a tour circuit with a bunch of people hearing it every day. Then Kerry King saying that he has no interest in even doing shit anymore. He's just going through the motions.
And so if you see those bands selling huge numbers of albums while your stuff is sitting there on the shelf and you can't give it away.
Absolutely. So
when they're lined up, hundreds deep to buy those bands' shirts, and you're sitting there with them half priced and nobody wants one.
Exactly. And then you got, this is where you start hearing Tom saying fuck a lot. He's starting to get harder. The lyrics are getting harder. And, this vocal line gets very popular in the rest of their catalog. I mean, rhyming is off the charts. The lyrics are getting a little less clever. I mean, I never had this back in the day, and listening to it this week was the first time, and it's not good. It's still, to their credit, it sounds like Slayer. They detuned. They've, thickened up some of their riffs to try to appeal to that Korn crowd and whatever. They tried to dip their toe and, keep it where it was, but dip the toe in the water just to see what it felt like. And Slayer fans, I don't think approved. They probably gained some fans on the tour circuit they were on with the bigger festivals and shit. But yeah, this is 12 for me. This is 12 for me all day long. It's not even a contest. But that leads us to God Hates Us All, 2001.
This album. Yeah, I do own it. It's got the censored cover too.
I gotta say, Melanie, I love your Slayer collection tonight, because for maybe the first time ever, I am not the sickest little monkey on this show.
Yeah, I was gonna say you out sickened the end boss monkey. That's not this is not good.
Much like Slayer, I'm gonna have to up my game and go buy the entire Linkin Park catalog this weekend.
But let's go look at how many copies of Jag Panzer we have of Ample Destruction. That'll make you feel better. They'll return you to the
got a new one coming out later this summer.
I don't hate this as much as the last Peeping Pile of Garbage, but it's still not great.
It's an improvement.
It is an improvement. I I just get bored with it. I think that's generally what my issue is with it. Kind of uninspiring. I think this is the last album with what's his name too. I think Dave Lombardo comes back after this
Paul
album again.
Bostaph, yeah, he come. This is his last album for a while.
I don't quite. I don't hate the album. I listened to it this week,
Sorry.
and I was just bored. I think I found myself kind of spacing out towards after like the third song. It's just not great. I think it's funny that the album cover was so controversial it held up it being released, and then they released it on September 11th. And then they did this, which is funny. So
yeah,
this actually cracks me up. I kind of like it. Honestly, they should have just made this the album cover. It's kind of ironic looking. But it's not nearly as bad as Diabolus. Not nearly. Diabolus just, I had this at number did I have this at number 10? Yeah. Some good songs here and there. Warzone song I like. I don't really, this is just one of those albums I don't ever listen to really ever. I would be fine if they had never released this album. I don't really have much good to say other than that. It's not terrible. It's kind of boring. Kind of stale. It's a stale album to me. This is their album where I really start to hear, along with this, that the band maybe should start to hang it up a little bit. They do redeem themselves a little. But yeah, whatever. I don't really have much to say about this album. I don't have really high praise of it. It's just kind of to me. Not something that it's filler. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's a filler album.
Alan.
Yeah, this one, it's better, but then again, how could it not have been?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got they've done themselves a pretty big hole to get out of by this point. This album, when it came out, now this one, a lot of people were really skeptical. They had gotten burned by the previous album, and so a lot of folks, when this came out, there was a lot of uneasiness. Like, are they going to put something decent out, or is this just going to be more shit? And the consensus was that it was still a lot of shit on this album, but it is better. It does have its moments, and there's a lot less of the it just 90s tripe on it, but it's still there. Looking at the track list here, some things. God Send Death, not bad. Now, this feels a little bit like it could have been a leftover song from the early 90s. It doesn't have those trappings, that weigh down the Diablo song so much. But, then you get to a song like Threshold, and, swear to God, you can just, hear them chanting in the background, let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies. Just like, that's not at all what you want Slayer for. If you want that kind of vibe, and there's a place for that, that's what you've got Pantera for. That's what you've got, any, WWE Attitude Era bands for. That's not what you come to Slayer for. It doesn't work. Seven Faces, kind of a cool song, kind of a creepy vibe on that one. Don't mind that one at all. So there are some moments here and there that are okay. It's a step up, but it's not a huge step. This is very much just the point where it feels like, I just don't need to mess with this band anymore. There's no reason to be heavily invested in Slayer by the time this album comes out. There's just not. So I ranked it 10th. I'm pretty sure I did. Let's double check. Yeah, 10th here. I wouldn't give it an F. I would say maybe 4 out of 10, 3.5 out of 10. It gets a few points at least. So, it has some songs that you could listen to and, not want to instantly vomit. But yeah, overall, God hates us all, and most of us hate this album. So that's where we're at. Slayer's got a long way to go from here to kind of get back in the good graces of their fan base. Marty, how much do you or do you not hate all of this album?
Out of 12, it's number 11. And
Okay.
I didn't mind the song Disciple. Again, it sounds like Slayer. They've improved. They've kind of starting to wean themselves off the thicker new metal vibe.
Mm-hmm.
It's very lackluster. It's 2001. It's just Slayer going through the motions, punching the clock, which they go on tour for a year or two. It's hard work. It's got to be taxing. They're probably not overly inspired at this point. It is what it is, and it's not good. And the people that like it, cool. Cheers to you for liking it. We all hear music differently, and it's still a Slayer record. But yep, number 11 for me. Which brings us to 2006 Christ Illusion, which finds original drummer Dave Lombardo returning to the fold. Melanie, what are your thoughts on Christ Illusion?
I actually really love this album. It was a redemption for me. I hate the album artwork. I don't know.
It's not good.
It's not good.
It looks like the dude lost a limb in a hacky sack accident.
Yeah.
It looks like a hacky sack. Jesus.
I remember when I first heard the song Jihad, and I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh my God, finally Slayer's making good music again. I bought it. I bought it the day it came out, and then I ended up, when I sold all my CDs, I got rid of it. But then I found it for $6 I don't know, a while ago, a couple of years ago, and so I snagged it again. I had this at number 6, so people will think I'm crazy, but I think this is a criminally underrated Slayer album. Especially listening to it again a lot this week, I still feel that way. I mean, they're older. It's obvious in Tom's voice. But I think I agree with Jason. I think Lombardo made a difference for me. I think I just might be a Lombardo fangirl. I prefer the Lombardo albums. And I really love this album. I probably would have ranked it a little bit higher if I didn't love all the albums so much more, but I think this is a good redemption album for me. And I think here on out, they end their career in good fashion with this album. I think they've redeemed themselves from the last two. And I love this album. I think Jihad really is what sold it to me, and pretty much everything on it I think is good. I was trying to see like who wrote most of the songs, and it still looks like Jeff Hanneman wrote a lot of these songs. For some reason I thought Tom Araya had a little bit more. I think he might have, because the songs are slightly a little bit different, but I think it actually got pretty good reviews too when it first came out. And again, it might have just been because people were like, it's got to be better than the last two that they released. But yeah, I like it. I think it's a good album. Like I said, I find myself listening to this along with the other top 5 that I have. So this is my number 6.
Right on. Alan.
Yeah, that's cool. My take on this album is kind of different. And I won't go on as long about this one. I've talked a lot about some of these kind of middle era Slayer albums. I did not foresee that happening. I'm in a chatty mood. It's been a busy week. I've been stuck in the cubicle a lot lately. But yes, Christ Illusion, it's obviously, Lombardo's back in the lineup. They're getting the old art style back. They're getting the old sound back. It's definitely meant to be a return to form. It's like, okay, guys, we get it. You really weren't big on the past couple of albums, so let's correct course. Let's give the fans what they want. And, it delivers pretty well in that regard. The production, is getting back towards, a sound that is much more classic Slayer. The songwriting is getting much more back towards something that's more classic Slayer. The art, the artwork, obviously having the classic 4 guys back together. It's all meant to help kick and drive that point home, and it does it okay. Now, when this came out, I remember the reviews being very mixed on it. That while people were kind of happy that they were out of their new metal kind of phase, a lot of people were not really sold on the content of the album. They're like, yeah, this is what we want them to be doing, but it doesn't really quite live up to the legacy of all their older albums. For me personally, I didn't have that reaction. For me, I think it's a pretty solid set of songs. They're it's a decent Slayer album, start to finish, more or less. But there aren't a lot of songs or moments that really stand out to me. This is one of those that if you're like building your Slayer playlist, it's like, what do I pick from this album? Geez. I mean, most people I think would pick Jihad, but I don't know what I pick. It's like, well, they're all decent to okay, but there's not a lot of really standout moments for me. So while it's a consistent album and it is Slayer being Slayer once again, and that's great, it's not an album I ever come back to. Funny story, I forgot I owned it in looking at things to play this week. So like, yeah, I'm gonna have to put Christ Illusion. I guess I'll just pull it up on YouTube, and that chick's like, oh wait, no, I actually have this on my iPod already. How'd that happen? Oh yeah, I guess I actually did buy it on download or something once upon a time. Who knew? That kind of sums it up pretty well. That while it's Slayer trying to return to form and doing a fair job at it, it's just, for me, it's not a memorable album whatsoever. There's no strong, compelling reason I would ever take this off the shelf when I can listen to one of the first 5 or 6 albums instead. In a weird way, it's kind of similar to Divine Intervention in that regard. And that's, as we talked about earlier, that's another one where it's a perfectly reasonably good Slayer album, but it lacks those highlights. It lacks the standout moments. It doesn't measure up to the legacy. Maybe part of that's just the band set the bar really high throughout their first several albums. And now it kind of feels like they're giving us what we want, but they're kind of also treading water at the same time. So I ranked this one. Where did I put this? Christ Illusion, I ranked 8th. And I would give it like a grade maybe C+, number grade, I'd be okay with something like, certainly 6 out of 7, maybe 7 out of 7 on a good day. Not a bad album, but just it just doesn't grab me, doesn't bring me back to it at all. So Marty, where do you stand on this one? We got a couple of different takes on it so far. What's yours?
Like you said, this was them, getting Dave back, getting the band back together, man, and speeding things up a bit, trying to right the ship. And my impression of this was in one ear, out the other. It's Slayer in function and form. It's them doing what they need to do. The songs are not bad. It sounds like Slayer trying to be, lethal and essential again. And I don't know, it's a swing and a miss for me. And again, that all kind of comes back to, sorry, it's Slayer, it's me, it's not you. It might be the case here. This is the first time I listened to this album was this week. I noticed, I'm like, okay, this is a definite them trying to be like, okay, sorry everybody, no harm, no foul. We farted around with some styles that maybe we shouldn't have. And hey, look, we got a kick-ass drummer back, which, Paul Bostov, great drummer, don't get me wrong, but Dave Lombardo's kind of custom fit for this band, for all those years and all those classic records. This just doesn't hold up with their classic era. They're not even close. Is it fair to hold a band that's been together this many years to the fire like that? I mean, we said that on the same, the Metallica stream. Is it fair to hold them to, they're never going to put out Kill 'Em All or Master Puppets or Ride the Lightning again. Slayer's never going to do Show No Mercy or Hell Awaits or Rain and Blood again. So they can try, but it's going to be a swing and a miss. I put this at number 9. It's solid, but there's albums after it or before it that were much worse.
Yeah. One follow-up point there, Marty. There's a little difference there between the Slayer and Metallica analogy. You're right in both cases. Neither band's ever going to be able to replicate what they did early. But Metallica has never really tried to go back to that style. With this album,
they kind of did.
At this point on
Hardwired, they did. There was like 3 songs on Hardwired that's like, oh, thrash, Spit Out the Bone.
That's a song though. That's that's one song on a double length album. Yeah. But the Slayer at this point really does just try to. Slayer goes right back to home plate. I mean, they go back to their safe space. And again, everything from the cover art on down, they are trying to recreate, what they, were best loved for.
Yep.
Metallica, love them or hate them, Metallica never went back and tried to recreate an album like Master of Puppets or Justice or Lightning. They went off on a different trajectory completely. So yeah, a little different there.
I do agree with Human Falafel. Death Magnetic does have elements of thrash on it. I like that record.
They can still, Lux, Eterna, it is a song on the new album that definitely could feel, it's got, the speed and the gallop of even stuff they did early on from Kill 'Em All. But
it could have been on Kill 'Em All. Yeah.
But not much else from that album could have been on Kill 'Em All. I mean, so yeah, I wouldn't say they, or have done that. They weren't trying to do the same thing of going back. But Slayer here definitely wants to recapture the glory days of their career, which is okay. It's, a different kind of a lot of bands have done that. When we talked about My Dying Bride, My Dying Bride very much did the same thing after the, 37.53 divided by pi square root of -1 album, whatever that was.
Yep.
Anyway, so after Christ Delusion, where do we go next?
World Painted Blood, 2009. Jeff Hanneman's last album with the band. Sadly, due to a liver failure and getting bitten by a recluse spider.
Yeah, he was also sick before that with something else too. Not the cause of his death, but earlier in their career, he had an illness that was a little bit scary too. I remember reading about that. But yeah, this album's okay. I think they're trying to get their aggression back.
Yeah.
You can tell it's what they're trying to do. I was reading about it because I don't really know. Like, it's one of those things that one of these albums I don't really listen to a whole lot. I had this ranked at number 9, so you probably now know where Repentless is if you've been paying attention. Probably because it's one of the albums I just kind of forgot it existed for a while there. At the time of it coming out, I was heavily into death metal. I wasn't really paying much attention to what bands like Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer were doing. I had kind of moved on from the big four. Well, big three, I should say. I was never a Megadeth fan. And I just didn't really pay much attention. When it came out, I didn't really have much excitement around it. Obviously, I own it, so I listened to it. And it's not a terrible album by any means. I think it's still a filler. I think generally this was an album that they did for themselves. So they got in the studio, they wrote it together in the studio, whereas in previous albums they had most of the stuff written before they entered the studio. I think this was kind of like one of those, like, let's just be bros and write an album together. And it's sad that it's Jeff Hanneman's last album. But I think this is really the time where I was like, okay, they need to hang it up. Like, after this album, I think it's okay if Slayer just doesn't write any more music anymore after this. But it's not a bad album by any means. Nothing really, really, truly stands out too much about it. Hate Worldwide is probably the song that I would listen to if I were to play this and put it into a Slayer mix. World Painted Blood starts off good. But yeah, it's not terrible by any means. It's not their worst album. It's just, kind of a filler album for me. Maybe I'll fall in love with it the older I get. But yeah. And yes, I do own it.
All right, Alan, World Painted Blood.
Yeah, like Melanie, I kind of missed this one when it came out. 2009, I was digging really heavily into obscure 80s stuff at that point. I was paying very little attention to, new releases, by, currently active bands. I was looking for Pentagram singles and more new wave of British heavy metal stuff. Basically, I had gotten my first big boy job, with a paycheck that came with money you could actually fold. And I was tracking down a lot of the records I had always wanted to own and had never been able to, afford or find. So yeah, I had zero attention being paid to anything new that was really coming out around 2009 or so. That was a block of time where very little caught my attention. So yeah, didn't hear this one until much later. Didn't remember anything about it until I played it a few times this week. Yeah, it's not too bad. Melanie's right. It's definitely the band getting their aggression back. It's got a better production than Christ Illusion did. I like a lot of the soloing here. Everything sounds pretty clean. Yeah, decent set of songs overall. This is one. If there's one that I've kind of quote unquote rediscovered going through the Slayer discography prep for this show, this would be the one that's like, yeah, maybe I need to go back and play that one a few more times. Or, hey, if I see that in the used bin for $7, yeah, we'll let's add that, take it up to the counter. Yeah, several songs. I didn't care for the opener too much, but Unit 731 and stuff, not bad tracks. I think Tom's vocal delivery is a bit better on this album than it had been for a while. And I don't think he's doing anything drastically different, really. Maybe it's just something they're doing with the production or the way they're recording his voice. But for some reason, it doesn't sound that bad. Tom's vocal delivery, while it is very iconic, it can also start to grate on you if you're not in the mood for it. He can get into just that rapid fire machine gun dog barking kind of phrasing of everything where sometimes, I put Slayer on, listen for about 4 songs, and it's like, I just don't need to listen to him keep going over and over. But here, I like how he's doing the vocals throughout most of this album. Yeah, Beauty Through Order, kind of a cool song. There's a lot of faster songs on this album. A lot of the speed is back, but the songs, hold together. They're very coherent. So yeah, pretty good. Playing with Dolls has, a cool creepy vibe to it as well. There's a couple of moments. There's one or two here where they do get, stray back towards a little bit more of that, stompy beat. They're starting to light and smoke effects for another wrestler to come out from behind backstage, but then they're like, no, wait, cut back to commercial. Don't come out. No, never mind. So they stray towards it, but it doesn't fully happen. So as such, I think it's a pretty decent album. I've got it ranked number 7, which is the highest of the post Divine Intervention part of their catalog. I'll give it a grade again, around C+, B-, with more listens and more attention. This one might creep up to like a B, puts it in that 7.5, 8 out of 10 kind of category. Not a bad album for it to be Hanneman's last recordings with the band. Obviously sad, but it's a pretty decent album, if it had to be his last one. Again, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's not Slayer doing anything really new or testing the waters at all. They've been there, done that. They know where they need to come home and roost, and they are roosting and painting the roost with blood, apparently.
All right. Yep, they roosted. And really, if you were to strip away some years here, World Painted Blood could have came after Seasons in the Abyss. It's got the lineup back. It's got they're starting to feel a little bit more like, middle era Slayer, but more so before they jumped off the cliff. But I like the record. First time I heard it, I thought it was pretty decent. Would I ever buy it? Maybe I'd pick it up used. I mean, this is these are records that should be easily found in the used bin, you'd think. This whole era leading up to this, all these you should be able to find these online cheap and in just about every single record store. I would think they were mass produced. A lot of people didn't hang on to them. I might circle around and snake a couple of these just to fill a few holes. World Painted Blood and Repentless, I'd probably pick up, but this is number 8 for me. I don't have a lot to say about it. It's good to hear Lombardo on it. Like I said, it could have followed up Seasons in the Abyss, and it would have been a much better fit than Divine Intervention, even, to be honest. I do like Divine Intervention, but this could have been the transitional album between that and Divine Intervention for sure. So number 8 for me, which leads us to the band's seemingly final album, 2015's Repentless.
Which just to be a nerd about, Repentless is not a real word.
It's not a real word. No, it's not.
This word does not exist in the dictionary.
Also the first album and only album on Nuclear Blast, which is one of my least favorite albums, record labels. I like the album. I was excited when it was announced. I was nervous that this band was going to continue on for years and years after Jeff Hanneman passed. They recruited Gary Holt, who I absolutely love.
Which is a good. It's not a bad fit. I mean, they're all from back in the day. They're friends. It makes sense.
Yeah, I really, really liked it that they recruited him. I think for me, I have this at number 8. I like it just a little bit more than World Painted Blood. I think that's just for the simple fact that I was excited that they were releasing and continuing on, but also kind of nervous that they were going to continue on. At this point, it's like, what, 35 years that they've been going strong?
Yeah.
I think at that point, like, you start to tell yourself, like, okay, maybe stop making new music. Just ride the coattails of your greater older albums and maybe continue to tour and appease fans. I was glad that this was their last record. I think they ended strong with it. Definitely better than some of their other albums that they've released. It's not reinventing the wheel whatsoever.
Oh.
They're not doing anything special on this. Tom Arai's voice is definitely old and tired, and you can hear it on here, but it's not terrible by any means. I really liked they really promoted the hell out of this album. They did a lot of interesting things with it. They made like a movie, like I can't remember what it's called right now. I'm blanking on what it's called. And just, doing the nuclear blast things that they do. And then I saw their farewell tour. I liked the songs they played live off of this album. I think it sounded phenomenal. I think Gary Holt was a good addition for the band. I think they ended really strong with this album. And I still listen to it. I do. I pull it off and I'm like, you know what? I don't mind. I don't mind the record at all. I think it's good. I don't think it's terrible. I'd probably give it a B, maybe, kind of B-. It's because it's not perfect by any means. I think it's a little long in a Slayer sense. I think probably could have axed a couple of songs from it. What's it track at? I'm gonna laugh if it's like 30 minutes.
Let's see. It's at 12 minutes and 41 minutes. 12 tracks, 41:58. So 42 minutes.
So, and there is a song from Jeff Hanneman on here at Piano Wire, which I thought was nice that they added that in here. But for the most part, Kerry King and Tom Araya wrote most of the album. Really just, I'm glad they hung it up after this. I'm glad that they're done. I'm glad they're not writing new music. I think this was a good ending point for them. I think they ended the legacy in a classy way. I don't know, classy is kind of a weird word to say with Slayer. But yeah, and I got the stupid slipcover because apparently they don't like this image. So yeah, I've got the slipcover, very bland. But yeah,
they're not real good with slipcovers.
No, but yeah, and I think it's okay. It's not terrible. I wouldn't mind getting the DVD. I'll probably get it just for the whole completist thing. I did watch it for the first time ever, not that long ago.
All right, Alan.
Something to point out that I noticed going back through all the albums this week that just came up on Melanie's conversation. Say what you will about later Slayer albums. If you're not into them, that's absolutely fine. They did at least avoid the trap that so many of these legacy bands fall into of just making the albums longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. Slayer's never made an album that got to the 1 hour mark. Most of them always hung out around 41, 42, 38, 44 minutes. So when you listen to something like Diablos in Musica or God Hates Us All, you may think it's an awful album, but at least it doesn't go on for like 66 minutes or 72 minutes or 79 minutes. They did always keep the albums, to a very reasonable length. So props up for that. As far as Repentless goes, yeah, I mean, everybody, Melanie did a good job explaining the backstory on the album. Folks know the circumstances. This album, it's a reasonable Slayer album. Once again, they're in their roost. They've ordered some curtains. They've gotten a futon. Yeah, hooked up the cable. They are staying there. They are not venturing forth anymore. They know what people want to hear them do. That's what they're going to record. That's what they're going to sell. Nothing wrong with the album overall. I guess I heard it when it came out, and then I had not revisited it probably since then. So this was another one I had to kind of rediscover over the past week. Not really a bad album from start to finish, but it's kind of like Christ Illusion. Doesn't have a lot of standout moments for me at all. I have no idea what I would pick if I wanted to put together, the best of Slayer playlist or anything. But it all sounds okay. It is Slayer doing what they do well. I agree with Melanie. Yeah, Tom's vocals are kind of sounding tired, and at this point, they probably should. He's been doing this for a long time. They all have at this point. I forgot to mention it with World Painted Blood, but and you can kind of see this for a lot of the albums. Well, Slayer is trying to say oh no, we're still the same evil, spooky band as always, and still trying to generate some controversy with the album covers and stuff. Lyrically, they managed to do that sometimes, but they also, they kind of lost that plot a long time ago. There was one thing I just had to point out from World Painted Blood. There's a song called Americon, which literally includes the line, quote unquote, "It's all about the motherfucking oil." And it's just like,
there's a lot of F-bombs dropped on the last few albums.
You pointed that out a while ago, Martin. You're absolutely right. Tom's leaned more and more on just kind of very base, crude profanity to go for it. That's not how you sound evil. That's not how you sound over the top or extreme. Anybody can do that. And just having them carrying Slayers. At this point, they like to rant and sound angry about things, but it doesn't have a whole lot of impact anymore. I guess they're angry about something involving Saudi Arabia in this song from kind of skimming over the lyrics. Okay, sure.
Middle Eastern politics, man.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think of when I think of, Slayer. It's like, yeah, OPEC. Wait, what? Huh? We're going to carry on about, oil prices on the international market. Maybe it's their punk side showing a little bit. I don't know, but it doesn't interest me. And that's kind of, where we're at. Slayer, like you've said a couple of times at this point, Marty, Slayer just doesn't interest me a whole lot. There's not a reason for me to invest a lot of time into these albums. It's like, well, you made another Slayer album. Good for you. Why am I going to listen to this one over Hell Awaits? Why am I going to listen to this one over Seasons in the Abyss?
You're not.
I've got to get
unless you have a channel where you do silly little exercises like this, and
Or again, the case you make for is like, well, if you're burned out on those albums, but you still want your Slayer fix,
different.
These are functional Slayer albums. You can listen to this and get some of those Slayer vibes with a set of songs that you don't know by heart inside and out. So they do have their place. I ranked this one 9th. I don't have it a bad grade. Melanie said B-. I'm giving it like C+. So, we're pretty close there. It's an above average album, but not by much. That's where I'm at with Repentless. And I agree 100% with Melanie's stance. I'm glad they're done at this point. This was 3 albums in a row where I've had kind of a similar take of they've returned to their roots, but they're just rehashing the same thing. How much longer were you going to do that? There comes a point where it's time to hang it up. And obviously, with the passing of Jeff and such, this was, kind of a natural place to do it. So good for them for knowing when to call it quits. Fingers crossed they don't get the itch to put it all back together and bring it back out. You never know. Metal bands, rock bands have a tendency to do that. But at least for now, they've laid the beast to rest, and they did so on an okay note. They didn't go out on an extreme high, but they certainly didn't go out all dragging their tail or anything.
I should also comment that Tom Araya definitely was not watching CNN. It was definitely Fox News. For anybody that's familiar with Tom Araya and his politics.
Yeah, we don't need to go deep. No. That's always what I think. That may be actually another thing that did cost Slayer some credibility here or there. Not that he went, in like the Fox News side of things. back in the like mid 80s, like we all talked about, and you talked about, Melanie, like you kind of had to hide this band from folks. You did not want people knowing you were into it. This was a band that elicited very harsh reactions from parents and teachers and any kind of mainstream folks back then. But would it do so now? Not really. They lost that edge a long time ago. They became, again, they now kind of just, they're just kind of middle-aged guys ranting angry about the economy or the government or some conspiracy thing. And it's just like, it just doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah. His wife is definitely the one that's a little bit more nutty.
Yeah. Also the fact, it came, it seemed like, these really were like, back in the day, these were the true sons of Satan. And then later on, you find out, they're all Catholics.
It was all an act.
Yeah. They're hardcore, churchgoers. Not making fun of that. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. But how are you going to sell yourself as, join Satan in hell and, show no mercy, when is like, dude, didn't we see you in pew number 3 on Sunday morning?
Tithing like a good Catholic and saying sorry for all your sins of the week before.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm guilty, sorry.
Yeah, the mystique is gone about Slayer by this point.
I think that's probably what made me like them more so, because it just shows like how like creative artists they are to be able to do that.
Yeah, they sold it. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, for anybody looking for or that was heavily invested in wanting the extreme, true, cult, dark thing, Slayer can't sell that. No, we've seen behind the curtain. It's a man pulling levers that was making the giant, horned beast head pop up in the smoke, over there scaring Dorothy and the Scarecrow when they were children. The mystique's gone by this point. But anyway, sorry, Marty. Back to you.
All right. No, Repentless.
Take on Repentless.
I got to give props to Kerry King for the fact that, let's be honest, Jeff Hanneman wrote the better songs. Kerry King, he knows what Slayer is. He wrote a pretty solid Slayer record here. It's not as good as, Hanneman. I mean, towards the end of Hanneman's life, he knew what Slayer was as well, but the quality of riffs just wasn't the same. Gary Holt, the only contribution Gary had to this record was he got his own solos. Yeah, I don't think he contributed any songs to this. He just wrote solos. And it was interesting listening on headphones to this record. You can tell which were Kerry's solos, and you could tell which were Gary's solos. They're very similar players. A lot of whammy bar, like, speed burst, messy solos with a lot of whammy bar tricks. Gary's whammy bar tricks tend to be a little bit more interesting than Kerry's. And that's not saying a lot, but I thought Gary was a good choice to replace Jeff as far as that goes. Gary never would contribute to a Slayer record, so it's hard to say what that could have sounded like. But Repentless, the first time I saw the video for the first song when it hit, and I thought, wow, it sounds like Slayer. It's all right. Listening to the record, that was my opinion the whole time. Wow, sounds like Slayer. This is okay, with a lot more F-bombs and, whatever kind of pseudo political lame ass lyrics. I put it at 7. I thought it was better than World Painted Blood, surprisingly. I read a thing. Kerry King recently said that he wasn't ready to be done, and he feels like his income was stolen from him, from Tom saying, "I'm done, I'm retiring." I can see how that is frustrating when you want to keep going and the other guy that needs to be there isn't there anymore. I mean, they could have just toured. They didn't need to put out new music. Slayer, they could have went out and toured their first 5 albums and been fine from here on out, and people would still go and see. And you could throw in some newer songs here and there if you wanted. Put out a record if you had to. And circling back around to our conversation at the beginning of this show, is it us or is it Slayer? Did we just move on or did Slayer move on? Well, Slayer I think, you know, going through the catalog, I don't feel too ashamed in saying that Slayer kind of, yeah, I moved on. My taste got a little more extreme. My taste changed, but I still have a love for Slayer. I love these early albums. Like I said, they're part of my DNA. But in the grand scheme of things, even by their own admission, they lost the plot. They were burnt out. They were tired. You know, you punch the clock you're a lifer. You're waiting for that pension. And Tom Araya had the good sense to say, you know what? I'm ready to retire. I'm ready to sit back, collect that pension. We've toured the world. We've wrote some endlessly influential albums, and we wrote some going through the motions records that don't hurt us that bad. Like at the end, I think they righted the ship pretty well towards the end. It's about as good as they could without, you know, Jeff Hanneman of sound, mind, and body. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Did I say 7? Yeah, it's my number 7, which is kind of a generous, but I don't feel bad about it. Does anybody have any closing? That was kind of my closing thing on Slayer. I think it's a unified thing. I moved on, and I think Slayer kind of lost the plot over the years. But what do you guys think? Melanie, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, I would have been happy if they had ended at maybe Divine Intervention after that.
And then there have been a whole contingent of people who are like, what if Slayer would have kept going? I mean, it's like, what if Cliff Burton would have survived? I mean,
yeah,
Cliff Burton was into Thin Lizzy and Southern rock and country music and other stuff. I think he probably would have been fine with Metallica's evolution. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm actually kind of shocked that Kerry King hasn't released some new project or some super group. I kind of just been kind of waiting to see. I pretty much just knew like Tom Araya, you know, he's had that neck surgery and stuff like that. So if he were to come out of retirement, it would probably be some country acoustic thing, I'm assuming.
There's no whammy bars on acoustic, not happening.
I mean, it's one of my all-time favorite bands, even though there's a few stinkers in their discography. Is it a perfect discography? Not by any means, but some of those like first 5 albums are so crucial for just me as a metal fan as a whole. And I think in that regard, if they released a new album right now, I probably wouldn't be too happy about it, but I would probably still buy it because I'm a completist. But I'm glad that they're done. I think that their legacy within their first 5 albums is good enough. I think, you know, people are going to continue to listen to those. I don't think they're ever going to be forgotten about. And I think they've done things that are just so crucial to any metalhead that's trying to navigate their way through understanding metal and getting involved in metal and learning about it. Slayer is often one of the bands that I tell people to listen to if they're trying to get into metal music, as long as they're okay with the satanic stuff. But when they later find out that it was all like an act, that might make them feel better. But yeah, no, this was fun for me. I was really excited that you guys said you would want to do this because, again, it's one of my all-time favorite bands. And it was fun to listen to all this music again and just relive a lot of the nostalgia that comes with Slayer, to the point now where I'm like going back and rewatching the live shows on YouTube and stuff like that. I do wish they were still touring. I think that they would be very successful if they still continue to tour. Even now, at this time, even just that alone, I think they would do great with. So I'm kind of bummed about that, but again, yeah, I mean, it's really all I have to say. I think it's just one of the best bands ever, in my honest opinion. And of the 4 horsemen, of the big 4, probably my favorite of the big 4 too. And I really love Metallica's first, 4 albums, but Slayer's got a little bit more meat on their bones when it comes to the albums and the love for the band.
Sure. Alan, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good point, Melanie. Of the big 4 for American thrash, they were definitely the most consistent, and they definitely kept the torch for, just pretty straightforward thrash going a lot longer than any of the others did. Like we talked about, it really wasn't until 98 that they, kind of abandoned ship for a while. They all the way up through 94 with Divine Intervention, they were still doing exactly what they had always done, and the others had already gone in very different directions by that point. I saw the band once in the early 2000s. That would have been probably God Hates Us All tour. Thinking about the timeline, they were great the time I saw them. I know I mentioned earlier that they had a pretty iffy reputation for quite a while there as to whether or not they would phone it in live. They were great the time I saw them. It was a kind of a medium-sized club setting, so pretty intense. Folks were definitely packed in there and very, very hyped up for Slayer. It was one of those shows where it definitely it felt like a Slayer show. It was very intense. You felt a little bit dangerous, which is what Slayer was always supposed to feel a little bit like. But yeah, your narrative tonight, Marty, has been a really good one, I think. Over time, I think we just outgrew Slayer a bit. Slayer got as extreme as they could. They grew up and kind of drifted a little bit. They kind of had to, and everybody else did as well. But yeah, I do think it's to their credit that, well, like Melanie said, they had a couple of duds in their catalog. Almost any band that came through that era did, but they did right the ship reasonably well. And when they righted it, I'm making a little fun of them tonight for just kind of, going back to Roost and all that. That was probably, though, the right thing for them to do from a business standpoint.
Yep.
And, in terms of, helping cement their legacy.
The brand, keeping the brand pure.
And the Slayer very much became a brand at that point. Like
when Metallica, Megadeth, it's a brand. It's no longer a band, it's a brand.
Yeah. I was, thinking while listening to y'all, well, what else would they have done? I mean, they obviously couldn't keep making albums like God Hates Us All and Diabolos.
Because music changed quickly.
Music changed again, but they also, there was just no fan base for what they were doing with those two albums. What else would they do? They could have tried to have amped it up and followed some other extreme metal. Could they have come back and tried to have become a blackened thrash band and get Tom to sound all raspy, or double down more on the and go more into like some kind of death metal sound? I don't know how that would have been received either. So yeah, while it's easy to say, well, they took the easy way out and just kind of started redoing what they'd done in the past, what direction would they have gone in that would have satisfied fans and allowed them to continue their career? And that's part of it. Again, it's really easy to say that musicians should always be adventurous, or musicians should take chances or whatever. Musicians also got to pay the bills, and none of like we've documented, these guys weren't making a full career living out of this band, even as successful as they were and as a big name they were. They needed other sources of income to make ends meet. And if Slayer had to do that, imagine what it's like for every other band you've ever heard of who was a tier or two down from Slayer. Those bands, you take too many chances and you got nothing left. So can't really fault them too much for going back to what they know well, what they did best, and what they knew would go over well with an audience and allow them to continue their career until it had to come to an end. So yeah, very consistent band, very, very iconic band, some of the most beloved and recognizable albums in all of heavy metal. Can't ask for much more than that from any band. So there you go.
There you go. And thank you, Melanie, for bringing this topic to us. I don't know if Alan or I would have ever really maybe gotten around to this. Maybe we would have. We probably should have. Way sooner than we did. But
I was kind of surprised. Yeah, when Melanie gave us the list of topics, I was just like, "That's such an obvious one. We never did." Huh.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. That's
you guys
and it was immediately like, and Melanie's the perfect person to do it with. So yeah, why wouldn't we?
Yeah, you did Saxon. I was like, we got to do Slayer. Saxon's a really long, like a lot of albums, which I'm still getting through, by the way. There's still like 5 or 6 I've never heard.
The next person that suggests a 27 album long discography for a dive. I'm pile driving their private parts.
I almost suggested Exodus because I think they have like what 17 or something like that albums.
Oh, there's a bunch of theirs I haven't heard.
But
I lost track of that band.
That was too hard because there's so many albums I have not heard by Exodus.
Yeah, those require a lot of prep time. Yeah, but no, this was a great topic, Melanie. Thanks for pushing it to the front of the line, and thank you for coming on and talking with us tonight, covering the band. Really cool, very good topic, and it was really good to hear your take on them.
What's coming up for you next, Melanie? Obviously people that watch this channel may seen her face on some reviews she's done for us, and she'll be continuing to do for us.
Yeah.
She also has her own channel, Melanie Loves Death Metal. What's coming up with you?
Well, let's see here. I made my other channel, which I'm trying to divide the time up, but I haven't uploaded there in like 2 weeks. For Melanie Loves Death Metal, I have a couple of collabs coming. I can't really say too much about some of them right now. A live stream is coming up, I think, where we're going to do a Cannibal Corpse deep dive, which is going to be exhausting.
Second verse, same as the first.
Yeah. But that's been actually requested quite a bit by a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, other than that, I've just been trying to focus on doing some more reviews, getting better with that. It's not my strong point, but I think like the more I do them, the more comfortable I feel doing them. My next review is tough. I chose a tough one to get through, but I'm doing it. So there'll be a review coming from me soon. But yeah, not a whole lot. I'm in between like getting a new job and stuff like that right now, so my YouTube channel is kind of suffering in that regards. But I do have a couple collabs coming up, and within the next month or two that I'm excited about. So
Bathory is going to happen. We'll be having Chris Maycock on, who is writing a book about Bathory right now. And as soon as that book is completed and published, we'll have him on. We'll talk about it. You'll remember him from High Spirits. He's in the lead man in High Spirits. Super Christ. And he's also Pharaoh.
Yep.
And,
yeah, we've been a lot of folks have requested Bathory. We have that one reserved for Chris. We've told him when the book is ready, you tell us when you want to come on and promote it, and that will be Bathory night. And until then, it will wait. Folks, some other good suggestions. We will probably do Overkill sometime, but that one that's going to have to be one of those where we've got about a month to prep.
I've got all of their records except for the new one, so I
lost track of that band ages ago. Yep. I love their early stuff, but there was a point in like the late 90s or early 2000s where I just stopped paying attention. Kind of like we've talked about with Slayer, I kind of just drifted away from that band, so I will need a lot of prep time to go through Overkill, but it would be a good one to do.
TJ, Rain and Blood is not a mini LP; it's an album. Come on.
Folks have been arguing about that all night in the chat. It's an EP or an album or whatnot.
Wait, I will get the new one. I've heard half of it. It sounds killer. And I'm an Overkill fan. They were one of my favorite bands in high school.
Yeah,
so
I like it. I like their new album.
Yeah.
I'm hearing lots of good things about it, but I have heard lots of good things about every Overkill album for over a decade. And usually when I check some of them out, like I'll play it once or twice on YouTube or something, and my reaction is usually like, yeah, it's okay. And that's it. I instantly forget about it. So I'm probably not going to rush out and check this one out, but sooner or later we will do the Overkill discography, I'm sure.
But yeah, that's it. Also, for those of you who don't know, Alan also does Let's Talk Metal. Definitely go check out his channel. Every Tuesday he uploads a new video. Always compelling, great stuff. We got a bunch of reviews coming. Ben Smasher, Brain Smasher's done a couple reviews. Alan's got a new one in. I need to get my shit together and get a new one up.
Yes.
Anyway,
I've got the new Rune Magic album and also discussion of the new Mournful Congregation EP on one that's coming up. And next week for Frank and folks like-minded to Frank, next week's Let's Talk Metal will be a bunch of old, obscure 12-inch EPs from U.S. metal bands that at least 3 people might have heard of once. So it'll be fun to dig into some of those.
I liked your latest video with your son. It was cute.
Yeah.
Oh,
totally
thank you very much. Yeah. We were all kind of sick at home with hay fever, and he was bored, and was like, I got something fun we can do because there's a box here and I don't know what's in it.
I might get Parker on a video one day too. He's starting to turn out to be kind of a little bit of a metalhead, so that's cool. But anyway, we appreciate everybody that joined us in the chat. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. It helps. It helps us out. There's a percentage of you that watch every week but don't subscribe. It helps us out. We're trying to get to the 5,000 mark so we can make Alan listen to Halloween's Chameleon, which should be fun for all.
It's gonna be a dark day, but I will do it. I promised. 5,000 subs, not a sub less.
But yes, cheers everybody. Thank you for all your show suggestions, and
thanks to all who did the super chats earlier.
The super chats, the contributions are awesome. They help out a bunch. Show notes. I'm gonna try. Ben's got 2 reviews in. Dodheim's Guard will be on Monday. I'm gonna try to get his Immortal review up this weekend. Alan's coming with reviews. What do you mean? Halloween's one of his favorite bands, TJ. Come on. You're the one that's the holdout. They're the one we need to get to. But yep, lots of stuff coming up next week. The album club. I can't remember what the pick was. Do you remember, Alan?
I don't. I missed this week's episode, so I do not know.
TJ, what's the pick for next week? Shit. I'm gonna have to find this out, obviously, since I'm part of that show.
Is it Beharit drawing down the moon?
No, we've already done that one.
I know.
We already did that one.
Just hear TJ.
Oh, it's Gorgoroth, Under the Sign of Hell. We're going to be covering Gorgoroth Under the Sign of Hell. So, yes. Anyway, cheers, everybody. We love you. Have a good one. Melanie, thank you so much. Yep. Don't hang up. We'll chitter chat in a minute for a minute. Guttalax, yeah. Anyway, cheers, everybody. Have a good one. Have a great weekend.
Everybody take care. Hey, one last time, everybody. 1, 2, 3. Slayer!